Chapter 674. Finding Euphraia. These puppets were pulsating with immense energy that was equivalent to the one he had met in the stone room. Judging from the looks of it, even a Saint Realm expert would be killed even if he came here. Luo Qiqi and Zhang Xian had nearly died dealing with just one. It took them careful planning and much effort just to get rid of it. To encounter 8 at once. With an awful complexion, Zhang Xian proceeded forward. Boom, 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 boom. A while later, the ground suddenly started shaking relentlessly with a peculiar rhythm. Zhang Xian frowned. The shaking was forceful, reminiscent of shock waves emanated in a clash between experts. However, what was bizarre was the constant short interval between each tremor. Nevertheless, this trace of battle raised Zhang Xian's hopes. Could it be that they are still holding on? Zhang Xian's eyes lit up. Even though the otherworldly demons had been forged into puppets under Wu Yangzi's hands, they possessed no emotions or irrationality that would make them fight one another. The only possibility was that Euphraia and the others were still alive, and they were still fending them off. But those were Saint Realm puppets. How did Euphraia and the others manage to survive for so long? Speeding up, Zhang Xian flew to where the tremors were originating from. In the midst of his journey, he saw yet another 3 puppets walking in a straight line, similar to the ones he had seen previously. This is already the 17th one. Making a quick count of the puppets he had encountered, Zhang Xian's face darkened. It was fortunate that he hadn't come here in his physical body, or else it would have been no joke if he had been surrounded by these guys. While his cultivation had advanced greatly in recent times, and he had the Library of Heaven's Path behind him, he knew his own limits. He might have gotten past the Saint Realm expert by hoodwinking the other party with his words before, but against lifeless puppets who only followed instructions, he knew that death would be the only outcome from an encounter with them. Something is wrong. If Euphraia and the others are still alive, why are these puppets walking away instead of encircling them? As Zhang Xian encountered more and more puppets, a seed of doubt slowly sprouted in his mind. After noticing that Euphraia was still alive, those puppets should have been rallying one another to deal with them. Why would they be walking away instead in such an orderly fashion? Even though Zhang Xian was confused by the situation before him, he continued to advance at top speed. Zhang Xian didn't dare to fly too fast for fear of inducing any significant reverberations in the air from his movement. After advancing for around another 8 minutes, he finally arrived at the source of the tremors. Along the way, he had seen many scars of battle as well, but they were of a relatively smaller scale compared to the first ones he encountered. Most likely, they were trying to fend off the otherworldly demon puppets as they retreated. The fact that he had yet to see their corpses yet meant that there was a good chance that they were still breathing. To be able to survive so long against so many Saint Realm otherworldly demon puppets, they were indeed formidable. They are over there. After taking a detour around a high-rise building, Zhang Xian noticed that the source of the tremors was right before him. Quickly raising his gaze to take a look, a vast square appeared before his eyes. It covered an area of several dozen mu, and stationed at the very center was an altar. Most probably, it was a tool they used to pay respect to their ancestors or the heavens back when they were still alive. 15 mu is almost equal to a hectare. Bizarre symbols were inscribed on the altar, leaving one with overwhelming dizziness just by looking at it. There were various peculiar statues erected around the altar. They resembled a fusion of various beasts, forming an extremely sinister sight. A powerful killing intent emanated from the statues, inducing a cold shiver down one's spine. They are still alive. As Zhang Xian's gaze fell on the center of the altar, his eyes lit up. Over there, a barrier of light was erected, and 2 otherworldly demon puppets were striking it ceaselessly. This was where the tremors were coming from. In the barrier of light, Euphraia, Xingyuan, and the others were seated cross-legged at the very center. Their faces were pale, and their bodies were drenched in fresh blood. It seemed like they had suffered grievous wounds while attempting to escape from the otherworldly demon puppets. What an incredible trump card! Looking at the barrier of light, Zhang Xian was impressed. To be able to fend off the relentless attacks from 2 Saint Realm puppets, The resilience of the barrier was indeed incredible. It probably belongs to Yufei or Xing Yuan. Considering the standing of those two, it wouldn't be surprising for them to possess such means up their sleeves. Realizing what was going on, Jiang Xian heaved a sigh of relief. As the princess of Hongyuan Empire, it was natural that she would carry a lot of defensive artifacts so that she could protect herself in face of danger. Otherwise, due to her exceptional identity, it was unlikely that her family would be willing to let her venture out alone. On the other hand, given how Xing Yuan could pursue the princess so openly, his family background was likely to be exceptional as well. While their artifacts might not be sufficient for them to fight against the otherworldly demon puppets, it was sufficient for them to stand their ground temporarily. But this barrier of light seems to be on the verge of crumbling. Jiang Xian frowned. No matter how powerful an artifact may be, it was limited by the amount of energy stored within it. Taking his dragon scale protective amulet for example, while it was able to withstand an attack with the full might of a transcendent mortal 9 Dan, it was only limited to 3 uses. While the barrier of light that the 4 were in was able to withstand the relentless attacks from the 2 puppets, its light was dim, and it seemed like it was going to break apart soon. And once it did, it would spell the moment of their doom. I must find a way to save them. The current situation placed him in a dilemma. If he were to instruct them to dispel the barrier of light, the 2 otherworldly demon puppets would surely rush straight at them, and Jiang Xian had no confidence in bringing all of them out alive with them on their trail. But if the barrier of light wasn't dispelled, they would be trapped here. What could be done at this moment? Furthermore, what puzzled Jiang Xian the most was that, judging from where the otherworldly demon puppets which he'd encountered on the way here were heading from, they were probably at this altar before. Why did the rest march away, leaving only 2 of them here? If all of them were to strike the barrier of the light together, it would have surely shattered by now. Assessing the situation a while longer, Jiang Xian was still unable to make sense out of the situation. Thus, he decided to drift a little closer to the barrier of light to get a better look. Why is there a corpse in there? Moving forward, he saw Yufei, Xing Yuan, Wu Jin, and Yi Qian were seated shoulder to shoulder in a circle at the center of the barrier of light, and seated at the center of the 4 of them was an old man. Even though there was no visible damage to the body of the old man, his withered and emaciated body revealed that he was long dead. A thought suddenly emerged in Jiang Xian's mind. Could this be Grandmaster Wu Yangzi? For a human corpse to appear here. Putting the clues together, the old man should be Wu Yangzi. When Jiang Xian couldn't find Wu Yangzi's corpse in the stone chamber previously, he had already been a little perplexed as to where it could be. From the looks of it now, the corpse had been here all along, and somehow, Yufei and the others had managed to find it, and they were currently guarding it. Of course, it was also possible that the corpse was guarding them. It was impossible for Jiang Xian to determine whether the barrier of light came from Yufei's group or Wu Yangzi. While Jiang Xian was assessing the situation carefully, cold sweat was dripping down the faces of Yufei and the others. Panting deeply, Xing Yuan said with a pale face, 6 Princess, it seems like we won't be able to get out this time. There was a glaring wound on his chest. Even though he had already applied some recovery medicine, fresh blood still kept oozing from it, forming a rather frightening scene. We'll probably die here. Wu Jin's face also darkened. They had all thought that it would be a simple mission. All they needed to do was to confirm the existence of the underground chamber where Wu Yangzi once stayed in. Who knew that this seemingly simple mission would actually lead them to so many formidable puppets? Chased all the way here, if not for Yufei's ample supply of defensive artifacts, they would have already died a few hours ago. At the very least, we chose the correct passageway. This is indeed where Grandmaster Wu Yangzi lived previously, and we even found his corpse. Yufei harumphed. Amidst this despair, this was the only consolation she received. At the very least, she managed to best that smug Jiang Xian once. Since Grandmaster Wu Yangzi's corpse was here, it could only mean that they had found the right place. Her greatest regret now was that she wasn't able to see the smugness wiped out of that fellow's face. You're right. Xing Yuan nodded weakly. Then, turning around to Yufei, he asked, "6, Princess, since we're already on death's door, can you tell if you have ever liked me?" Seeing as the barrier of light continued to grow thinner and thinner, Xing Yuan knew that it was a matter of time before it shattered. Thus, he was unable to suppress the greatest question in his mind anymore. He had been pursuing this lady for a very long time already, but the other party had never reciprocated his feelings. Now that they were on the verge of death, he wanted to at least know the truth so that he could rest in peace. Hearing those words, Yi Qian and Wu Jin immediately turned their heads away awkwardly. Not expecting Xing Yuan to ask such a question, Yu Feier opened her mouth, but she soon bit her lips. After a long moment of hesitation, she shook her head. "I have already told you that before I become a 6-star master teacher, I'm not interested in engaging in any romantic relationship." She had an extremely competitive nature, and she had always wanted to prove herself to others. As such, romantic relationships were something at the back of her mind. Even though Xing Yuan had been pursuing her for some time now, her heart had never skipped a beat for him. "I knew it. I didn't stand a chance from the start." Hearing such direct words from the other party, Xing Yuan shook his head and smiled bitterly. "Then, are you interested in Zhang Xian?" Recalling that shameless face on that detestable young man, Yu Feier clenched her jaws in anger. "Zhang Xian? How could I possibly be interested in that despicable and shameless fellow? I must be mad before I can possibly fall in love with such a guy." She was a princess, a member of nobility, and yet the other party dared to force her to become his maid and serve him tea. If only that was all. When she went to reason it out with him, he even kicked her bottom twice. She had never seen someone as ungentlemanly as him. If not for the fact that she wasn't able to defeat him, she would have long rushed over to crush that man with her hands. Zhang Xian, who was loitering around the barrier of light to find an opportunity to save the group, heard Yu Feier's evaluation of him, and he staggered. "I am such an upright, kind, and magnanimous person. How in the world did I become a despicable and shameless man? Just like the wise sages of the past once said, woman and hypocrite are the two most difficult species to please. Such is indeed the case." Hearing her furious howls, Xing Yuan wasn't delighted in the least. Instead, he shook his head in disappointment. "The more ferociously you berate him, the greater the place he has in your heart. I have known you since we were little, and it has been more than 20 years since then, but have I ever occupied a space as big as him in your heart? When I said we weren't able to leave earlier, the first thing that came to your mind wasn't fear but that you have won a bet against him." Even in this desperate situation, all she could think of was Zhang Xian. From this fact, he knew that despite his years of pursuing her, his standing in the other party's heart couldn't even compare to that fellow she had just met. Yu Feier froze upon hearing those words. Was she really in love with that fellow? But how could it be possible? All she wanted was to rid herself of her identity as a maid and teach that shameless fellow a lesson. Affirming her intentions inside once more, just as she was about to verbalize them to Xing Yuan, a voice suddenly drifted into their ears. "Cough, cough. This isn't the time to be flirting with one another. You should be discussing how you can get away instead." Hearing that voice, Yu Feier's eyes widened. "Zhang Xian?" Chapter 675. Beating heart. Right after calling out that man's name, Yu Feier's face turned crimson, and she quickly shook her head in denial. How can he possibly be here? Considering the duration they had been fleeing for, they were at least several kilometers into the depths of the underground chamber. On top of that, there were many otherworldly demon puppets patrolling the area, ready to take out any intruder. Most important of all, that fellow had clearly entered the other passageway. So how could he possibly appear here? There was no doubt about it, she must be hallucinating. Right after she reaffirming that she would never fall in love with that despicable fellow, she actually hallucinated his voice and thought that he would come to her rescue. How embarrassing. It was just a passing remark, none of you heard a thing at all. Got it? Yu Feier harumphed furiously with a threatening edge in her tone. Cough, cough. Wu Jin and the others glanced at one another before replying. Princess, it seems like we heard those words as well. You all heard those words too? Taken aback, Euphea quickly scanned her surroundings anxiously. But other than the two puppets which were still striking the barrier of light relentlessly, there wasn't anyone aside from them. Since all of us distinctly heard his voice, it is unlikely to be an imagination on our part. Xing Yuan nodded. While he did detest Zhang Xian, it was still consoling to hear the other party's voice at this crucial moment. Seeing that the other party actually doubted his existence after he had spoken, he shook his head helplessly and continued transmitting his voice to them. All right, none of you are hallucinating. I'm indeed Zhang Xian, and I am here to save you all. My physical body is still outside, and I am currently using a secret art to transmit my voice over. As he couldn't reveal that he was a floating soul at this moment, this would expose his identity as a soul oracle. He could only explain it by this. If you're outside, could this be transmission over 1,000 li? Xing Yuan and the others widened their eyes in shock. One must know that not even a transcendent mortal 8 Dan could possibly transmit his voice so clearly over several kilometers. Could it be that Zhang Xian already possessed such immense strength? Seeing that Zhang Xian was aware of their situation and intended to save them, Euphea heaved a sigh of relief and asked, How do you intend to save us? Do you have an idea in mind? This fellow might be hateful, but he did possess incredible capabilities. Otherwise, how could she possibly have been bullied so many times and yet still be helpless against him? It's precisely because I don't have any ideas that I'm here to discuss this matter with you, Zhang Xian said. He really had no idea in mind. His soul might have been able to sneak in without catching anyone's notice, but if he were to attempt to bring the others out, they would surely be surrounded and killed before they could get far. Discuss? If we had an idea in mind, we would have already escaped from this darned place long ago, Xing Yuan said with a darkened face. His spirits had lifted after hearing Zhang Xian's voice, but who would have thought that the other party was as lost as them? All right, why don't you all tell me the situation here in death? This will help me find a viable solution to your current plight. For one, I saw quite a few puppets walking away from your direction when I was scouting around just now. Under normal circumstances, they should have all gathered here to get rid of you together. Why did they walk away, leaving only these two here? Zhang Xian raised the doubt that had been plaguing him all along. If all of them were to attack at once, the barrier of light would have shattered long ago, and this group would be cold corpses by now. While the puppets didn't possess intelligence, it was reasonable to think that they were programmed to encircle and defeat any intruders into the underground chamber. After all, the puppet he had met in the stone room before had pursued him frenziedly, threatening to grind him into meat paste. As such, how could they possibly let such a huge group off? Perhaps there might be some fundamental logic to it. If he were to exploit this, he might be able to find a way to save the group. Not too long after we entered this underground chamber, we encountered those otherworldly demon puppets. We were immediately overpowered by them, and they deliberately blocked the way back to the passageway. Thus, we could only retreat deeper into the underground chamber while fending them off. Yi Qian swiftly explained everything that happened. Right after walking down the flight of stairs, they immediately saw this underground town, so they quickly rushed to it excitedly, thinking that they had found a vital clue. Who could have thought that they would meet with the otherworldly demon puppets not too long later? That was also the region where Zhang Xian first found the traces of battle. Surrounded by a group of Saint Realm puppets, they were naturally not a match at all. It was fortunate that Xing Yuan and Princess Fei possessed many valuable artifacts on them. Hurling them out while retreating, they managed to fend the enemies off. Even so, they were still severely injured through the many encounters. Fleeing all the way to the altar, they happened to find Wu Yangzi's corpse and triggered the mechanism he had left behind. It was then that the barrier of light emerged, and they got a moment of breather. Meaning, this barrier of light was indeed an artifact left behind by Wu Yangzi. It was probably a means to prevent his corpse from being defaced by the otherworldly demons after his death. But who could have known that it would unintentionally save the juniors who came searching for him 2,000 years later? However, judging from the current state of the barrier, it was unlikely to last too much longer. After hearing Yi Qian's works, Yu Fei harumphed. Who said that those fellows didn't gather here in an attempt to get rid of us? All 20 of them were here a moment ago, or else the barrier of light couldn't possibly wane so quickly. Just that, for some reason unknown to us, they left abruptly. It wasn't that those fellows didn't come to encircle them, but that they were unable to break the barrier and left. Who knows when they will return? All of the defensive artifacts they possessed were depleted. Once the barrier of light shattered, they would lose their only protection. Even if Zhang Xian was here to support them, it was still highly unlikely that they would be able to escape. You said that they left after attacking the barrier for a moment? Zhang Xian frowned. That didn't make sense at all. If those fellows had continued, the barrier of light would have shattered by now. Why would those puppets march off during such a crucial moment, leaving only 2 of them to continue? The group nodded. When did they leave? Zhang Xian asked. Around 10 minutes ago or so, Yi Qian said. 10 minutes ago? That's around the time that little Qi and I left the underground chamber. Frowning, a thought suddenly surfaced, and Zhang Xian's face darkened. Could it be that these fellows found out that he had breached the other passageway, and were heading over to support their ally? If that was the case, he would be in great danger. His physical body was still hidden in the passageway near the entrance of the underground chamber. If he were to be noticed by them, wouldn't his body be smashed into pieces? Give me a moment, I'll look around and figure something out. His physical body was of the greatest importance to him now. He couldn't allow anything to go wrong with it. Not to mention, if his physical body were to be ruined, there was no way he could help Yu Fei and the others out of their current plight. Thus, leaving behind these words, he immediately rushed off. Hey! Hey! As his voice slowly faded, the surroundings grew silent once more. Yu Fei shouted in panic a few times, but she didn't receive any response. Infuriated, she smacked the ground with her fist. What the heck was that? He was here to save them, and yet he disappeared without doing anything at all. What was he up to? Zhang Xian couldn't be bothered with the resentment that was piling up on him at the moment. His soul rushed all the back to the passageway at the quickest speed possible. It was due to his fear of being noticed that he moved slowly previously, but given that it was likely that his physical danger was in danger now, he couldn't bother about that anymore. Soon, he arrived back at the flight of stairs. There are no puppets here. On the stone steps, his physical body was still meditating quietly by the corner, untouched by anyone. Was I wrong? He thought that the other puppets were rushing to aid their ally in the other underground chamber after learning that it had been breached by intruders, but that didn't seem to be the case. Zhang Xian scratched his head in confusion. Clone! Who? Releasing his clone, Zhang Xian placed his physical body into his storage ring. While his physical body couldn't survive for too long in the storage ring, this should be the safer course of action for the moment. Naturally, the ring was left with his clone. Even though his clone had proven to be unreliable on many occasions, the might of the 9 Hearts Lotus wasn't for show. Those otherworldly demon puppets might be formidable, but it would still be extremely difficult for them to kill his clone. At the very least, his clone should be able to ensure the safety of his main body. Wait here for me, I'll take a look to see what the puppets are up to. At the very least, I'll be able to prepare for whatever they are up to. After instructing his clone, Zhang Xian's soul flew into the depths of the underground chamber once more. Given that those puppets weren't going to the other underground chamber, they must be up to something. Otherwise, they couldn't possibly let Yu Fei and the others go. Thus, Zhang Xian felt that there was an imperative need for him to uncover what those fellows were up to. After flying for a moment, Zhang Xian saw the first wave of puppets once more. They were currently moving to the corner of the city. What are they doing there? The corner of the city wasn't lit up by night illumination pearls, so it was pitch black. Nevertheless, the puppets marched on tirelessly, disappearing into the darkness swiftly. Eye of Insight. With the Eye of Insight activated, the pitch-black area suddenly became visible to his sight. The Eye of Insight wasn't just capable of seeing through facade, even darkness couldn't conceal its vision. Examining the surroundings closely, Zhang Xian continued following the puppets forward. Very soon, the puppets left the city and arrived before a stream. It's probably connected to the stream I saw above. Zhang Xian's eyes shot up. To think that the stream above would actually flow through this area as well. However, what were they planning to do here instead of attacking Yu Fei and the others? Voila! In the midst of Zhang Xian's confusion, one of the puppets stepped into the river. Jai. As soon as the puppet stepped in, a series of gears clicked, and a round pedestal appeared in the middle of the stream. As soon as the round pedestal surfaced, an overwhelming killing intent immediately filled the surroundings. The blast of overpowering killing intent induced an immense pressure weighing down on Zhang Xian's soul. To think that the killing intent even affects souls. Zhang Xian quickly drove the heavens past soul art, and only then did he finally recover from the impact. He couldn't help but narrow his eyes. He was currently a soul, possessing no shape and no form. Who knew that the killing intent emanated from the surface round pedestal would be so powerful that it nearly caused his soul to plummet to the ground? The scale was completely incomparable to the living otherworldly demon that Hong Shi caught. What in the world is that? Gathering more lines of insights in his energy, Zhang Xian focused his gaze on the round pedestal. Even without thinking, it was clear that there was something wrong with the current situation. On the round pedestal, there was an object around the size of the watermelon. It contracted and expanded at a constant frequency, creating a loud rumbling noise reminiscent of thunder along with its movements. A heart? Zhang Xian's body froze. He was doubtful at first, but the more he looked at it, the more apparent it became to him that the object placed at the center pedestal was a crimson heart. Why was there a heart here? And more importantly, how was it still beating? Just as Zhang Xian was perplexed by the situation before him, he saw the puppet which leaped into the water kneeling before the round pedestal. Hoo. Along with the beating of the heart, spiritual energy was drawn from the stream by the heart and infused into the puppet. The worn-out puppet immediately became energized once more. The puppets are recharging their energy? Zhang Xian clenched his fists in agitation. Chapter 676. Reduced to a lump of meat, even a cultivator would eventually find himself drained and exhausted after fighting for a long period of time. Needless to say, a puppet. These puppets were installed with a spirit-gathering formation in their bodies, and they relied on absorbing the spiritual energy from the surroundings or from spirit stones to move. Thus, if they were to overexert themselves, it was possible for them to stop functioning due to lack of power. This explained why the 20 or so puppets left shortly after attacking the barrier of light. It seemed that they had overexerted themselves by striking the barrier of light with their full might relentlessly, and thus needed to recharge themselves. This underground stream is actually a spirit vein, and it gathers the spiritual energy from the meandering mountain range that spans 1,000 kilometers. There is indeed sufficient spiritual energy contained in the stream to replenish the energy in those puppets, but even so, it shouldn't be easy for the puppet to absorb the spiritual energy in the stream so easily and quickly. There's something very weird about the heart. Just as a cultivator couldn't possibly restore their jinqi to their full capacity in an instant, a puppet also needed some time to recharge itself. To recover completely within a few breaths was downright absurd. Most probably, this ridiculous situation must have something to do with the heart. In the first place, it was already bizarre that a heart overflowing with killing intent would actually be placed within a stream of spiritual energy. Furthermore, there was something very sinister about this heart that seemed to send endless chills down Zhang Xian's spine as he looked at it. This eerie sight was triggering all of his alarms. Gugugugga. While Zhang Xian was still examining the beating heart in bewilderment, another otherworldly demon puppet stepped forward. Along with the beating of the heart, it recovered its strength. It'll be disastrous if this goes on. Seeing the otherworldly demon puppets regaining their strength one by one, Zhang Xian's heart beat in anxiety. If he didn't do anything, it wouldn't be long before all of the puppets recovered and returned to attack Yu Fei and the others. Should that happen, the latter would definitely die here. I must bring Yu Fei and the others out of here before all of these puppets regain their strength. Zhang Xian clenched his fists together grimly. In truth, this could be considered as an opportunity as well. Most of the puppets were currently busy recharging here, and it would take some time before they would return. This was probably the only chance he was going to get to save them. Once the other puppets returned, there would be nothing more Zhang Xian could do. But even if that is the case, I am still unable to defeat the 2 remaining puppets to save you fair. While Zhang Xian knew that he had to firmly grasp this opportunity, the might of the 2 remaining otherworldly demon puppets was simply beyond him. Not to mention, if a fight were to occur, it was likely that the disturbance in the spiritual energy in the air, as well as the shock wave from the trading of blows, would catch the attention of the other puppets as well. Chances were the puppets would encircle them before they could get away from this underground chamber. The main reason why Zhang Xian was able to kill the previous otherworldly demon puppet in the stone chamber was due to assistance from Luo Qiqi's side, and the apt usage of a valuable artifact, the Crimson Blaze Cauldron. Given that neither Luo Qiqi nor that artifact were here, it was nigh impossible for Zhang Xian to slay 2 otherworldly demon puppets. In the end, his options were restricted due to his low cultivation realm. Right, I could do that. Just as Zhang Xian was rubbing his glabella in frustration, an idea suddenly streaked across his mind. Carefully analyzing and fixing the various aspects of his plan, his eyes slowly grew brighter and brighter. After confirming that it was feasible, his soul immediately flew off. He didn't head off to the altar where Yu Fei and the others were waiting. Instead, he quickly returned to the passageway to return his clone to his storage ring before wrapping his soul energy around the ring and carrying it to a remote, narrow alley within the city. Then, he summoned his clone and a humongous corpse out from his storage ring. The humongous corpse consisted of 2 parts, a head and a body. It was the otherworldly demon which he had decapitated back in the stone chamber. Possession! Zhang Xian took in a deep breath before his soul dived into the puppet's body. Hula! Similar to the soulless metal humanoid, these puppets were forged out of real bodies as well. Thus, it wasn't too difficult for his soul to enter the body. Just that, due to the overwhelming killing intent infused within the body, only a person who cultivated the Heaven's Path soul art like Zhang Xian would be able to enter such a body. Any other soul oracle would have had their soul dissipated before they could even come into contact with it. Jai. As soon as Zhang Xian's soul seeped into the body, the puppet on the ground twitched, and it began to struggle to its feet. It's indeed possible. Zhang Xian heaved a sigh of relief. Just as Zhang Xian was considering how he should save Yu Fei and the others, he'd suddenly recalled the existence of this corpse in his storage ring. Even though the puppet's head was lopped off, that wouldn't hinder its ability to house a soul. As long as Zhang Xian could possess it, he should be able to move it. Perhaps, he might be able to fool the otherworldly demon puppets through this and save Yu Fei and the others. The possessed puppet bent down to grab his head and place it on his neck. Then, it began to shake its limbs to adapt to the new body before running off to the altar excitedly. But barely after taking a few steps, pang! The puppet crashed into a pillar, and its head rolled far into the distance. The puppet immediately fumbled its way to its head, picked it up, and installed it on its neck once more. Typically speaking, it would be impossible for anyone to tell that the puppet was currently possessed. However, due to the puppet's head having been severed before, it could fall off very easily, and that would be a dead giveaway. I'll have to support it then. If the puppet's head were to shake on top of its neck while moving around, Zhang Xian would surely be exposed. Thus, he could only helplessly raise his palm to support his head while making his way to the altar. The place he was hiding at previously wasn't too far from the altar, so it didn't take him too long to arrive there. We're doomed. Yu Fei and the others were waiting expectantly for Zhang Xian to arrive and save them, but who knew that an otherworldly demon puppet would appear instead? Their faces immediately sunk. The barrier of light was already on the verge of shattering under the combined offense of the two puppets. With one more here, their fates were sealed. Just that, there was something very peculiar about this puppet. Its head was tilting unnaturally to one side, and it seemed as though it would fall if not for a hand placed by its head to support it. It was an extremely eerie sight. The unnaturally bent head puppet soon arrived before the barrier of light, and it tapped on the shoulders of the two puppets who were still striking the barrier. The two puppets ceased their attacks and turned to look at the two. Roar! The bent head puppet pointed to his back, and tracing his finger, Euphraia and the others saw a human figure sneaking toward them under the dim light granted by the night illumination pearls. Zhang Shi! After taking a close look at the other party's appearance, Euphraia and the others began to panic. What the heck is that foolish man trying to do? If you want to save us, you should at least try learning how to hide your presence first. To actually stand right before a night illumination pearl like that, aren't you just waiting to be discovered? More importantly, after being noticed by the puppet with the bent head, not only did you not flee immediately, you even continued to advance forward. Does hell really interest you so much that you are bent on charging right into it? You aren't trying to save us, you are trying to court death. Roar! Naturally, the other two puppets also noticed Zhang Xian. Roaring furiously, one stepped forcefully against the ground and charged toward him. Against that fearsome charge, Zhang Xian's face immediately paled in shock. He immediately tried to escape, but there was no way he could possibly outrun a Saint Realm puppet. Thus, he was struck squarely in his head. Pung! His face caved in as if a donut, and his body went flying through numerous buildings. Zhang Shi! Zhang Xian! Not expecting that their savior would have his head crushed before he could even reach them, the bodies of Xing Yuan, Wu Jin, and the others trembled, and they nearly fainted from shock. It wasn't too long ago that the other party proudly declared that he would save them, and yet, he was killed as soon as he made an appearance. This was probably the most anticlimactic rescue operation of all time. Euphaia's eyes turned red upon that sight, and with quivering lips, she bellowed anxiously. Aren't you supposed to be formidable? I haven't won against you in a bet yet, you can't die like that. What the heck is this? Weren't you quite formidable when you were bullying me? Why did you become so weak before these puppets? How could you allow your head to be smashed in just like that? Shouldn't you have at least learned your lesson after accidentally reducing your body to a mere corpse while cultivating in the cleansing lake? The others also shook their heads in disappointment. They weren't in the position to grieve over Zhang Xian. After all, they were next. On the other hand, the puppet who smashed Zhang Xian's head in turned around and returned to the barrier of light after eliminating the intruder. However, before it could get far, the bent-head puppet pointed to its back once more. Frowning, the puppet turned around, only to see the fellow from before standing before it in an upright position. While his face was caved in and his legs were shaking, he was standing firmly on the spot. Ah? This? Xing Yuan, Wu Jin, and the others who had just given up all hope widened their mouths in shock. To be able to stand up after his head was caved in to such an extent. Are you serious? The dumbfounded Euphraia mumbled in a daze. He isn't dead? Recalling something through her quivering red lips, she muttered. Did he get possessed by some spirit again? A similar situation had occurred back at the cleansing lake. Back when their attention had been captured by something else, his lifeless body had secretly crept back into the lake. Could it be that history was repeating itself? After all, how could a person whose face was caved in like that possibly stand up once more? Being possessed in itself was completely inconceivable already, and yet for it to happen twice to the same person within such a short period of time. Just how many vengeful spirits have you offended? Roar! The ridiculous scene left even the emotionless puppet stunned for a moment. But after which, it immediately dashed forward and kicked Zhang Xian. Pun! Under the might of the powerful kick, Zhang Xian's ribcage broke, and his chest sunk inward. Once again, he crashed through many buildings, disappearing amidst a cloud of dust. Confident that it had managed to slay Zhang Xian this time around, the puppet nodded in satisfaction. However, right after turning around, it saw the puppet with the crooked head pointing behind it with a look of fright yet again. Turning its head around anxiously, the puppet saw an upright silhouette with a sunken chest amidst the cloud of dust. Its hands were placed against its waist, as if nothing had happened at all. Ah! Euphraia, Xing Yuan, and the others were already completely stupefied by the sight before them. All of them slapped their cheeks tightly to confirm whether they were in a dream or not. What the heck was going on? His face was caved in, and his chest was sunk in, and yet he was still standing. What kind of sorcery was this? Who? Not expecting the fellow to still be alive after 2 consecutive strikes, the puppet roared furiously and dashed forward, striking Zhang Xian relentlessly with its fists and kicks. After a short moment, Zhang Xian was completely disfigured. Half of his head was blasted off, his body was crushed and had become almost as thin as a slice of a paper, and his bones had been reduced to dust. Only after that fellow was reduced to just a lump of meat did the puppet finally end its attacks. Satisfied, it turned around and walked back. But yet once again, the puppet with the bent head pointed behind it. Roaring furiously, it turned its head around and saw that figure which had been crushed into something without the slightest resemblance of a human standing up once more. His crushed arms were placed weakly against his waist, and his eyes were filled with mockery. The heck? Is that really Zhang Shi? How in the freaking world can he still be alive after all that? I must be dreaming. Yu Feier, Xingyuan, Wu Jin, and Yi Qian were completely overwhelmed by this madness. Considering how a part of his head had been blasted away and the tragic state his body was in, it should be physically impossible for Zhang Xian to stand up at all. This was probably not as simple as a mere possession. Not even a spirit could possibly make this lump of meat stand up once more. Chapter 677. Thank you, Zhang Xian. 6. Princess, you are the most knowledgeable of us here. Do you know what is going on? Gulping down a mouthful of saliva, Xingyuan asked. Aye. At this point, Yu Feier was on the verge of tears. As a princess, she had access to many secret manuals exclusive to the royal family, and she was also exposed to many unique techniques in the world. But even so, she couldn't imagine a single technique in the world that could allow a person to stand up after being reduced to a lump of meat. What about you? Xingyuan turned to Wu Jin and asked. Given how the latter specialized in mechanisms, he might be able to see the secret behind this peculiarity. I? Wu Jin's lips quivered as his face twitched violently. He specialized in mechanisms, not cryptozoology. How could he possibly know what was going on? While the few of them were rendered completely insane by the turn of events, the 2 puppets were also frenzied by the scene before them. To still be able to stand up after all of that, are you still a human? Ho. The bent-head puppet seemed to be frightened by the sight before it. He immediately patted the shoulder of the second puppet by the barrier of light and pointed to that monstrous fellow, gesturing it to head over there to support the first puppet. The puppet hesitated for a moment before nodding in agreement, following which, it immediately dashed for Zhang Xian. The overpowering killing intent of the 2 puppets overlapped with one another, thus exerting a formidable pressure on those before their presence. However, as soon as the second puppet came heading for him, Zhang Xian immediately turned around to flee. Who? With a swift leap, he disappeared into the darkness. Roar! Roar! Not expecting the other party to still be able to flee so quickly despite being reduced to such a state, the 2 puppets were astonished. They immediately rushed forward to pursue him, and before long, they disappeared into the depths of the darkness as well. On the other hand, staring at the escaping Zhang Xian, Yu Feier and the others were dumbstruck. Since you are able to flee, what the hell were you doing just now? To leave only after you are reduced to such a state, what is going through your mind? Hurry up! Lift the barrier of light and leave! Just as the few of them were bewildered by the situation, Zhang Xian's voice sounded. Stunned, they immediately looked in the direction where the voice came from. To their shock, it actually came from the bent-head puppet. Zhang Shi? The group stared at the puppet before them with perfectly widened eyes. Yes, it's me. I managed to lure the both of them away with a special art. Hurry up and leave with me. Otherwise, it'll be too late once the other puppets return. The bent-head puppet urged anxiously. Are you, really Zhang Shi? Even though the voice was definitely Zhang Shi's, the savage expression on the puppet made it hard to put the both of them together. Not to mention, They had just seen him getting smashed into a lump of meat. How did he become a puppet in the blink of an eye? Even the most proficient disguiser wouldn't be that exaggerated. I really am him. You lost a bet to me, and you are currently still serving as my maid. There was no time for them to waste. Knowing that it was normal for the other party to suspect him given his current appearance, Zhang Xian immediately tried to validate his credibility. He turned Xing Yuan and said, "Back at the cleansing lake, you came to look for me, asking me to admit my defeat. Fine, I believe you. You are Zhang Xian." Yu Feier's face reddened whereas black lines streaked Xing Yuan's face. There weren't many people who knew of Yu Feier becoming a maid, and the matter regarding Xing Yuan asking Zhang Xian to admit defeat on the bet was known only by the two of them. Thus, these served as sufficient evidence to prove that the puppet was indeed Zhang Shi. Who? After affirming the other party's identity, Yu Feier raised her hand and grabbed onto something, and the barrier of light vanished. Let's go! Knowing that there was a limit to how long his clone could distract the two puppets, Zhang Xian immediately led the way while holding onto his head. But after taking 2 steps, he realized that no one was following him. Thus, he turned around, only to see the 4 of them still seated on the ground with pale faces. "What's wrong?" he asked with a frown. "Our wounds are more severe than we thought. We aren't able to move at all," Xing Yuan said awkwardly. The other party had spent so much effort planning this operation to save them, and yet they were unable to run away due to their severe injuries. The entire group felt that they had let Zhang Xian down. "I don't think we'll be able to get away, so please bring Grandmaster Wu Yangzi's body back with you. Tell the Academy that we have accomplished our mission, and that we didn't let the Academy down," Xing Yuan said with clenched jaws. It was at least 7 to 8 kilometers to the passageway. Given their severe injuries, they would surely be caught before they could reach it. Since it was impossible for them to get away, they would rather Zhang Xian bring back the corpse. At least, this would bring some value to their deaths. What is the use bringing a corpse back? Not expecting that fellow to utter such words at such a timing, Zhang Xian shook his head. Of course, this action caused his head to fall down yet again. Hurriedly picking it up and implanting it on his neck, he turned to look at Wu Jin and asked, "Do you have any wine?" "Wine?" Wu Jin was taken aback for a moment before nodding. Flicking his wrist, he took out a gourd. He enjoyed wine, so he often carried such wine gourds along with him. Zhang Xian caught the wine and kept it in his storage ring. Following which, he established a connection with his main body he was currently storing inside the storage ring. His Heaven's Path Jinqi was contained only within his main body, so he couldn't infuse it in through just his soul. If it was before, he would have to bring his main body out, and have his soul enter it first before he would be able to infuse Heaven's Path Jinqi into the wine. However, having achieved Mind of Void, his physical body was able to move even without a soul in it. Gugugugge. After infusing 7 to 8 surges of Jinqi into the wine gourd, Zhang Xian took it out from the storage ring and passed it to Yu Feier. "Drink a few sips." On. Even though she didn't know what he was up to, she knew that this wasn't the time for questions. Thus, she immediately uncorked the gourd and drank it without any hesitation. As the rich wine went down her throat, she felt a warm flow surging through her body. In less than 2 breaths, the excruciating pain she was suffering from turned into a mere numbing sensation, and the gaping wounds from before had healed completely. This. Looking at her recovered body, Yu Feier was stunned. Could this be the saint recovery medicine that Wu Jin talked about? It was actually so formidable? She quickly passed the wine gourd for the other 3 to drink, and soon, they were all fully recovered. "Xing Yuan, keep Grandmaster Wu Yangzi's corpse. Let's go!" Seeing that everyone had recovered, Yu Feier quickly instructed before the group hurriedly followed behind Zhang Xian. Having recovered their strength, they moved at a swift pace. The only problem they met was that Zhang Xian would have to support his head carefully so that it wouldn't accidentally fall off his neck. "We need to speed up." Left with no choice, Zhang Xian decided to just grab his head in front of his chest and charge forward. Even though his soul wasn't perfectly compatible with the puppet, he was still able to bring out a significant degree of the puppet's Saint Realm strength. With just a single leap, he would be able to cover a long distance. Euphare and the others had to push themselves to the limit just to be able to catch up. In a short moment, the four of them had already covered 3 kilometers. The passageway was slowly getting closer and closer to them. "Everyone, hurry up! We'll be safe once we escape from the passageway," Zhang Xian urged. The narrow entrance of the passageway would be perfect for Zhang Xian to set up his 6-star formation and block the otherworldly demon puppets, thus allowing everyone to escape safely. Roar! Just as they were fleeing with all their might, they suddenly heard a furious roar in the air. It seemed like the puppets had finally noticed that they were missing. Along with that roar, shadows suddenly flashed across their surroundings, and the puppets who were recharging at the stream earlier appeared before them, blocking their path of advance. "Damn it!" Zhang Xian's face darkened. He had been rushing all along in fear that these fellows would return after they were done replenishing their energy. Who knew that despite his efforts he would still be dozens of breaths late? "What do we do now?" Not expecting that they would be surrounded by so many puppets after escaping this far, Euphare and the others turned ghastly pale. They were only able to escape previously due to their numerous defensive artifacts hindering the attacks of the puppets. Now that they were all consumed, how could they escape from this encirclement? Roar! Zhang Xian stepped forward to explain, but a puppet rushed forward to kick him instead. Pun! His head and body immediately separated, both crashing heavily onto the ground. These puppets are actually able to discern friend from foe even among themselves? Zhang Xian narrowed his eyes. Zhang Xian was currently in the body of an otherworldly demon puppet. Even though his head could fall off any time, his outer appearance was no different from the others. Under normal circumstances, the other puppets shouldn't be able to recognize Zhang Xian, and he would be able to blend in as their peer. Who knew that he would be struck without any hesitation? Without a doubt, the puppets were able to determine their enemy. Weren't puppets a type of mechanism which didn't possess self-intelligence? How could it differentiate between an enemy and an ally? Damn it! Pushing itself up from the ground, the headless puppet charged toward the one which attacked it. A strong gust of wind whooshed, and immense might poured forth from his fist. Pun! The opposing puppet met the fist of the headless puppet with a fist of his own, and the headless puppet was immediately knocked flying once more. Even though the puppet was strong, Zhang Xian's current soul cultivation realm was only at consonant spirit realm pinnacle, thus preventing him from drawing upon the full strength of a saint realm. Naturally, he wasn't a match for the other party. Jai. While Zhang Xian was clashing with one of the otherworldly demon puppets, the others were slowly closing in on Euphare and the others. It seemed as if they would charge forward to kill the latter at any moment now. If this continues, they will surely die. With his current form as a soul, it was still possible for Zhang Xian to escape. However, if he were to do so, Euphare and the others would be killed the next moment. What should he do? Was he supposed to give up after going through all that effort? Forget it, I'll gamble everything on this then. Just as Zhang Xian was at a complete loss, he suddenly recalled that large beating heart he saw previously, as well as the respect the puppets showed it. An idea suddenly popped into his head. Since you all want to kill us, let's go down together then. I'll crush the heart right now. Bellowing furiously, the puppet which Zhang Xian was controlling immediately leaped up and dashed straight for the stream. Roar! 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 Hearing Zhang Xian's bellow and his direction of movement, the puppets were stunned for a brief instant before a streak of insanity infected every last one of them. Their attention were immediately torn away from Euphare and the others, and they hurriedly pursued Zhang Xian. You all should leave right now, there's no need to worry about me. Seeing those fellows pursue him, Zhang Xian heaved a sigh of relief. He turned to Euphare and the others and howled. Zhang Shi! Zhang Xian! Not expecting Zhang Shi to draw away all of the puppets single-handedly just so that they could get away, Euphare, Xing Yuan, and the others felt their hearts tightened, and their eyes reddened in agitation. If they were harboring some grudges or even envy toward him previously, All that was left now was gratitude. In order to save them, the other party willingly put himself in a position of grave danger. It was no wonder why Zhang Shi was so deeply respected by his students, and deeply trusted by the group from Hongfeng Empire. His character was indeed worthy of respect. Zhang Shi, thank you. We mustn't waste this opportunity Zhang Shi created by putting his life on the line. Let's go! Gritting his teeth, Xing Yuan and the others quickly fled to the passageway. Chapter 678, Zhang Xian is dead again? For them, Zhang Shi willingly lured away the puppets away into the depths of the underground chamber, using himself as bait. If they were to remain here and allow themselves to be killed, they would truly be letting everyone down. With eyes filled with indescribable, intense emotions, they exerted strength beyond their limits, and in just a few dozen breaths, they arrived at the passageway once more. Looking into the distance, the underground city seemed to have been blanketed by a cloak of darkness. The dim light from the night illumination pearls could no longer be clearly seen from their current location. Roar! 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 Boom! 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 Vaguely, the shouts of the otherworldly demon puppets and the sound of objects shattering could be heard. Knowing that the passageway wasn't safe either, just a single puppet here would be able to clear away all of them, Xing Yuan said. This place isn't safe, let's go up first. Zhang Shi should have an escape plan in mind. Knowing that they would be of no help even if they were to wait here, the crowd headed up, and before long, they were standing at the entrance of the passageway. Luo Qiqi, who was waiting on top, immediately rushed up to welcome the group excitedly upon seeing them. You've all finally returned. Are you all fine? We're fine. There wasn't the slightest bit of relief or joy one should have after escaping from danger on Yufei and the others' faces. Instead, they kept subconsciously sending worried gazes into the passageway. What's wrong? Noticing their peculiarity, Luo Qiqi frowned. Then, she suddenly realized something, and her body froze. Where is teacher? He... Xing Yuan clenched his fists tightly in agitation, and with a lump in his throat, he said hoarsely. In order to save us, he used himself as bait to lure all of the otherworldly demon puppets away. Bait? Luo Qiqi's face immediately drained of all color. How many puppets are there? If there is only one or two, teacher should still be able to escape. Her teacher possessed incredible means. If it was only one or two puppets, he shouldn't be in too much danger. With an ashen face, Xing Yuan said, There are more than 20 of them in there. More than 20? Luo Qiqi felt as if her heart had been plunged into an ice chamber. She trusted her teacher's capability, but it was still impossible for him to stand against so many puppets single-handedly. It took the both of them a great deal of effort to deal with a single puppet from the previous stone chamber. In the process of doing so, the two of them nearly died as well. To face more than 20 simultaneously, this was no different from suicide. No! I must go and save teacher. Gritting her teeth in determination, Luo Qiqi rushed into the passageway. However, before she could get far, Yufei stopped her. Qiqi, calm down! Zhang Shi had put himself into such a predicament just to save us. If you were to go in now, won't all his effort have been for nothing? Even though Yufei was panicking inside as well, she understood Zhang Shi's intentions, and that was why she was holding herself back. They were simply too weak at the moment. Even if they were to rush in, they would be of no help at all. Luo Qiqi trembled in agitation, and beady teardrops slowly flowed down her white cheeks. Even back at the stone room, in order to let her get away first, her teacher chose to fight against the puppet single-handedly, despite the risk of death. And now, to save Yufei and the others, despite knowing that it was a lair of otherworldly demon puppets below, he still rushed in without any hesitation. And now, he even allowed himself to serve as bait so that the others could get away. Teacher, how can we ever repay this debt to you? Luo Qiqi, we understand your feelings, but do you think that you are the only one who wants to rush in and save him? But if we were to do so, we would only be letting down the expectations and feelings Zhang Shi has entrusted to us. Xing Yuan stepped forward and said, "There's only one thing we can do now, that is to wait here patiently for his return. Let's pray that he can create a miracle once more." As a talented student of the Master Teacher Academy, he was able to see the crux of the matter easily. As 5-star Master Teachers, they were by no means weak. But against those puppets, their strength would be no different to throwing an egg against a rock. With their current cultivation realms, there was only one outcome that would arise from rushing in: death. Indeed, Zhang Shi will have a higher chance of survival alone. If we rush in, not only will we not be of any help, we might even become a burden to him," Yi Qian added. A trail of tears flowed down Luo Qiqi's cheeks as she replied with quivering lips, "I understand." She did understand all of this in the depths of her heart. After all the time she had spent with her teacher, she was well aware of what a person her teacher was. Her teacher was a person who would choose his morals over his life. It was exactly this quality that made him respected and admired by so many people. She knew deep down that the others were right. If she were to barge in now, she would only become a burden to the other party. "The best we can do for Zhang Shi now is to wait here." Seeing that Luo Qiqi had finally given up the thought, Xing Yuan nodded. But at that moment, his body suddenly shook. Hong long long! Cracks started appearing on the bridge, and the river beneath abruptly raged. "What is happening?" The group was taken aback. Why would there be such an intense tremor all of a sudden? Voila! Just as they were perplexed, fragments of rock suddenly began falling from the ceiling. The bridge and the passageway leading down into the underground chambers collapsed instantaneously. "This is bad, the entire underground chamber is going to collapse." Xing Yuan narrowed his eyes as he yelled, "Quick, go out!" If the underground chamber were to collapse on them, they would be buried alive. No one would be able to save them. Thus, without any hesitation, they immediately dashed for the passageway out of the underground chamber. Moving at their top speed, they were able to return to the mountain valley within 7 to 8 breaths. As soon as they were out, they suddenly felt another huge tremor, and a huge part of the valley's ground suddenly caved in, forming a large depression. It was as if everything that had happened was a dream. The underground chamber had disappeared entirely without a trace. "Teacher!" Luo Qiqi's legs finally caved in, and she fell weakly to the ground. If there had still been a chance that her teacher would be able to get out previously, how could there still be any hope now? Yu Feier's face also paled, and she sat down feebly beside her close friend. She had been competing with Zhang Xian all along, wanting to beat him in a bet. But never had she wanted him to die. Not to mention, all of this only happened because the other party was trying to save them. Recalling bits and pieces about that fellow, she suddenly felt that she was very immature. In the end, all the prejudice she had against the other party was due to her indignation at being ignored. In truth, after witnessing the other party's formidable strength and vast knowledge, even the haughty her couldn't help but admire him as well. After a short moment of silence, Yi Qian clenched his fists tightly and declared, "I'll return to the royal palace and get my father to send troops over here. Even if we have to overturn the entire area, we must save Zhang Shi." After hearing those words, Yu Feier also stood up resolutely, prepared to leave with Yi Qian. "That's right. I'll accompany you. If Yi Wentian doesn't dispatch any troops, I'll report this matter to my father." At this moment, her mind was only filled with a single thought. He mustn't die. The both of you can't go. Just as the two were about to leave, Xing Yuan dashed forward to block them. "What are you doing?" Narrowing her eyes, an aura of hostility began rising from Yu Feier. The full might of a transcendent mortal 6-Dan Cosmos Bridge Realm cultivator burst forth instantaneously, carrying fearsome power that caused even the air to moan in fear. The reason she lost to Zhang Xian previously was due to the latter's attacks being aimed at her vitals, thus preventing her from utilizing her full strength. But against Xing Yuan, she wouldn't face such a problem. "I don't intend to stop you, but have you thought the matter through?" Not expecting the sixth princess to actually intend to fight him, Xing Yuan's face turned ghastly white. Gritting his teeth, he said, This underground chamber involves both Wu Yangzi and the otherworldly demons. Do you know what consequences will arise if this news were to spread? Screw the consequences. Get out of my way! Yu Fei roared. Xing Yuan is right. At this moment, a soft but affirmative voice sounded. Luo Qiqi stood up and walked over, her body still trembling slightly. If even a single one of the otherworldly demon puppets in the underground chamber were to be unearthed, it could potentially eradicate the entire Huanyu Empire. Many lives would be lost. I believe that this isn't what teacher would hope to see either. Yu Fei tightened her fists in frustration. Teacher is a compassionate person. Since he is willing to give up his life for you all, how could he possibly bear to see millions of lives being lost like that? Luo Qiqi said with reddened eyes. A Saint Realm puppet was already a formidable existence, and an army of 20 of them was nothing short of destructive. No Tier 2 empire could possibly stand against such a force. Even if Emperor Yi Wentian were to send every last soldier in Huanyu Empire over, they would still be unable to save her teacher. Only a real saint could do so. If they were to let the puppets loose while attempting to save her teacher, he would never forgive them, not even in death. This was because he was simply such a noble person. Then, what should we do? Yu Fei asked anxiously. What we must do now is to quickly return to the Master Teacher Academy and report this matter to the elders so that they will come here to handle the matter, Luo Qiqi said. Xing Yuan nodded in agreement. That's right. If we wish to save Zhang Shi, it'll be best for us to quickly return to the academy and report this matter to the superiors and have them send men here. This is the best we can do at the moment. Yu Fei also nodded before issuing some instructions. All right then. Xing Yuan, since Grandmaster Wu Yangzi's corpse is in your storage ring, you and Yi Qian shall return to the academy right now. On the other hand, Luo Qiqi and I will wait here, for him to come out. This? Xing Yuan was stunned. He didn't think that Yu Fei would insist on remaining here. Fei is right, we'll wait for him here. The both of you should hurry on. This matter is of grave importance, so you must report it to the elders face to face. Otherwise, there is no way the academy will dispatch Saint Realm experts. Luo Qiqi nodded. Even though she did have a communication token that allowed her to communicate with the academy, every single Saint Realm expert was a valuable asset to the academy. Without sufficient evidence to back their story up, it was impossible for a saint to be dispatched here. To do so, they would have to present Wu Yangzi's corpse in person. All right. Understanding the rationale behind it, Xing Yuan hesitated for a moment before nodding. But if we take the aerial spirit beast away, how do you intend to return? The four of them came on a transcendent mortal 6-dan aerial spirit beast. If the both of them were to take it to the Master Teacher Academy, how would the other two leave the Verdant Mountain? There's no need to worry about us. If it really comes to it, we'll just head to the nearby Huanyu Beast Hall. With our identities as Master Teachers, it'll surely be easy for us to loan an aerial spirit beast. Luo Qiqi shook her hand before turning her gaze back to the depression. Even at this moment, she was still praying for the dirt to overturn, and for her young teacher to climb out from the depression. If that were to happen, no matter how dirty the other party was, she would definitely rush forward to hug him without any hesitation. All right then. We'll get going! Knowing that there was no time to waste, Xing Yuan immediately beckoned to the sky, and a loud screech sounded. Following which, an aerial spirit beast descended to the ground. Let's go! Along with Yi Qian, he leaped onto the back of the spirit beast. The spirit beast took off, and before long, they had already disappeared amidst clouds. After their departure, Luo Qiqi and Yu Fei stared at the depression before them, unblinking, waiting intently for Zhang Xian to return. With his formidable means, he couldn't possibly be dead. Even though they kept repeating this within their minds, they had no confidence whatsoever. With the ticking of time, their hope was slowly diminishing. In the blink of an eye, 3 days had passed, but there wasn't the slightest movement at all. The flame of hope they had held dearly onto had already withered into despair. Could it be that Zhang Shi had really died this time? Even if he was really dead, if he could be possessed just once more and appear before them, it would still be a huge consolation to them. Chapter 679. My name is Vicious. Rewinding time back to when Zhang Xian parted with Xing Yuan. In the underground chamber, a bizarre otherworldly demon puppet holding its head in its hand ran frenziedly as more than 20 otherworldly demon puppets pursued it relentlessly. They were howling furiously, threatening to rip the other party to shreds should they lay their hands on it. Seeing how the idea he'd thought of on a whim had sent all of these puppets into such a frenzy, Zhang Xian's curiosity intensified. In truth, this puppet body was disposable to him. As souls were intangible, it would be difficult for these puppets to stop him if he were to make a serious attempt at escaping. Not to mention, he had a golden page in the Library of Heaven's Path as well. Even if he were to be cornered, he still had a trump card up his sleeves, so there was nothing for him to fear. This was also the reason why he had the others flee first while he drew the puppets away. He thought that it would be great if he could draw some of the puppets away through his taunting. Who knew that he would actually successfully draw the aggression from all of the puppets, making them chase him rabidly as if he had murdered their parents? To actually make these unintelligent puppets get so agitated, what in the world was that heart? No matter what, as long as I touch it, I should know the answer. The only way to let everyone escape successfully was for him to continue drawing the attention of the puppets. Thus, without any hesitation, Zhang Xian continued dashing forward with his head in his hand. 7 breaths later, he was standing before the stream. The small stone pedestal and the heart were still there. Let's see what it is. With the puppets right behind his tail, there was no room for other thoughts in Zhang Xian's mind. He immediately leaped forward and stepped into the stream. Roar! 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 Upon seeing Zhang Xian leap into the stream, all of the puppets were worried, but none of them dared rush forward. They glared at him angrily, seemingly wanting to grind him to dust. Seeing that the puppets didn't even rush over as he had expected, Zhang Xian heaved a sigh of relief. In truth, back when he saw the puppets stepping into the stream one by one to accept a transfusion of energy from the heart, he was a little perplexed by the sight. And now, it seemed like his conjecture was right. There was some kind of rule binding the puppets that only allowed one of them to step into the stream at any given time. Let's see what this heart is. Zhang Xian began walking to the stone pedestal that the heart was placed on. Voila! As soon as his gaze fell upon the heart, he immediately felt an overwhelming killing intent piercing his mind just like a dagger. Knowing that this would happen, Zhang Xian immediately activated his Heaven's Path soul art and drove his soul energy. In an instant, that sharp pain weakened significantly, but even so, Zhang Xian still felt as if his head was splitting apart. Zhang Xian stopped in his tracks. It's hard for me to stand against the killing intent without Heaven's Path Jinqi. The killing intent emanated from the heart was far stronger than the otherworldly demon which Hongshi took out back at the Master Teacher tournament. Even though his soul had been tempered by the Heaven's Path soul art, it was still difficult for him to withstand that overwhelming killing intent without the protection of his Heaven's Path Jinqi. Even standing at this point was sufficiently difficult for him. If he were to proceed forward any further, it was highly possible that his mind would be corroded by the killing intent, thus suffering immense damage. Zhang Xian turned around to take a look at the other puppets behind him. While they were infuriated by his actions, they dared not get too close. In fact, they didn't dare to launch any attack at all. For the time being, there was no need for him to worry about his safety. Voila! He took out the body which he had placed inside his storage ring previously. Then, he withdrew his soul from the puppet and returned back into his main body. After entering his main body, he finally felt more comfortable, and he heaved a long sigh of relief. Even though the otherworldly demon puppet's body was much stronger than his current body, he wasn't able to control it adeptly, and there was a strong feeling of incongruity when he was moving it. Heaven's Path Jinqi. As his soul fused perfectly with his physical body, he immediately drove his Jinqi. In an instant, the killing intent which had still been assaulting him a moment ago was immediately warded off entirely, as if it didn't exist at all. Heaven's Path Xinqi seemed to possess the ability to curb the mysterious aura that otherworldly demons emanated. He had verified this back then during the Master Teacher tournament. Roar! Seeing a human appear in the stream all of a sudden, the puppets' anger crescendoed. They bellowed angrily at him, but in fear of something, they dared not step forward. As long as the puppets didn't dare to step into the stream, there was nothing for Jiang Xian to worry about. Thus, he continued advancing to the heart slowly. In order to trigger the Library of Heaven's Path, he would have to come into contact with it. With a few steps, he was already standing before the stone pedestal. His hand slowly reached forward to touch the heart. Ha 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 ha! Upon contact, Jiang Xian barely had the time to mutter flaws when a deranged laughter suddenly echoed in the surroundings. Following which, a huge shadow suddenly appeared before his eyes. This body! Great! Great! Even the heavens are on my side! That massive shadow before Jiang Xian roared in delight. The heart also began to beat faster and faster, as if it had encountered some precious, nourishing medicinal herb. With this body, I can finally revive myself after many millenniums of hibernation. The massive figure was shaking with agitation. With a loud bellow, its eyes suddenly opened, and a sharp glint flashed in its eyes. Kongsher, it's too bad you failed to kill me entirely. When I return, I'll crush your heritage and reduce your Master Teacher Pavilion to ruins. While roaring furiously, that massive figure stretched its hand forward to grab Jiang Xian up. That heart on the pedestal also suddenly rose up and flew to the left side of his chest. With immense force, it rammed itself against him, seemingly trying to penetrate his body to replace his heart. If it were to succeed, Jiang Xian's consciousness would be consumed, and he would lose his sense of identity. What? Jiang Xian's expression immediately froze. Before that massive figure, he felt like an ant standing before a mountain. Helplessness clutched his heart. It's too powerful. The strongest person he had encountered in his journey was Pavilion Master Mo from Hongyuan Empire. But somehow, Jiang Xian's instincts told him that even a person as strong as Pavilion Master Mo would be no different from a worm before this fearsome heart. The sensation he was feeling at this moment was similar to back when he first met Kongsher. His mind and body were no longer under his own control, and his life and death were held in the hands of the other party. Jiang Xian panicked. Am I going to be possessed by this fellow? He was only interested in seeing what the heart was. Never had he dreamed that the heart would actually be alive, and he would even be possessed at that. If the other party were to succeed in its possession, Jiang Xian's consciousness would be wiped clean. By then, he would be no different from a puppet. Heaven's Path Xinqi. Jiang Xian immediately willed for his body to drive his Heaven's Path Xinqi, but he realized that the mental connection between his mind and body had been snapped, preventing him from making any movements. He felt as if he was trapped in a dream. He could perceive what was going on around him, but no matter how much he struggled, his body just wouldn't move at all. Don't even bother struggling! The massive figure before the heart seemed to have noticed what Jiang Xian was trying to do, and it sneered coldly. Even Kongsher had suffered a great deal before my prowess. You might be a celestial master teacher, but you're still too weak to stand against me. I suggest you obediently allow me to take over your body. In your body, I'll dominate the world and make the entire world tremor beneath my might. Jiang Xian couldn't help but ask. Even Kongsher has suffered before your prowess? Who are you? Kongsher was the most powerful figure in the world several dozen millenniums ago. He single-handedly created the Master Teacher Pavilion to fend off the otherworldly demons and expel them from the Master Teacher continent. His contribution to humanity was so great that none could compare to him, and his cultivation was so high that he had no peers. And yet, this fellow actually said he was able to injure Kongsher? Who in the world was he? It has been too long for me to remember my name. The heartbeat and an ancient aura slowly exuded from the massive figure. But back then, everyone seemed to address me as Vicious. Vicious? That's right. Are you afraid now? Vicious asked. I never heard of you before, Jiang Xian replied. The heart. most of the details regarding the ancient history with the otherworldly demons were stored in the higher-tier Master Teacher pavilions. As a 4-star Master Teacher, Zhang Xian wasn't qualified to browse through those documents. And thus, he had truly never heard of what vicious or victim, whatever the other party was called. Humph, it matters not. Today, you shall witness my greatness. Not expecting for a celestial Master Teacher to not recognize him, the heart began beating intensely in anger, and with a loud roar, the huge hands of the shadowy figure grabbed Zhang Xian's neck. Jia! The crushing pressure on Zhang Xian's neck made him gasp desperately for air, and his sight began to darken. In the other party's hands, he was no different from an infant. He was unable to retaliate at all. Under this desperate situation, Zhang Xian forcefully uttered, "You intend to possess me? Indeed. A celestial Master Teacher is a person whose body has been recognized by even the heavens themselves. Even though I am a member of the otherworldly demonic tribe, I am still able to possess their body without incurring any side effects. In fact, I am even able to disguise as you humans without anyone noticing anything." The heart harumphed. "You are able to tell that I am a celestial Master Teacher?" Zhang Xian stuttered with difficulty. So far, there had been not a single Master Teacher who had been able to discern that he was a celestial Master Teacher. Thus, he didn't expect this heart would be able to recognize this identity of his. Could this heart really be an incredible expert on par with Kong Shi? To be able to stand against Kong Shi, how powerful must one be? And not to mention, if the other party had lived in the same era as Kong Shi, how could he still be alive now? The heart harumphed coldly. "That fellow Kong Shi is one as well. Having fought with him my entire life, how could I possibly not recognize a celestial Master Teacher?" Back in that ancient era, he was Kong Shi's greatest nemesis, and he had fought with the latter his entire life. Naturally, this had allowed him to grow accustomed to the various abilities and distinctive traits of a celestial Master Teacher. "Since you are from the same generation as Kong Shi, I must be nothing more than an ant before you. Why don't you let me down first? I won't be able to retaliate against you, anyway," Zhang Xian said anxiously. "Do you think that your tricks will work on me?" The heart sneered. "Given how powerful you are, I won't be able to do anything even if I wanted to." Due to the immense pressure crushing down on his throat, Zhang Xian was finding it harder and harder to speak. "I am about to be possessed by you soon. Before my death. I wish to know some things, so that I can rest in peace." "Humph, there's no use playing such tricks before me," the heart replied. "Why? You don't believe me? You spoke as if you were a formidable figure, and yet you are worried about someone as weak as me?" Zhang Xian replied. "Audacious. When I was roaming the world, even Kong Shi was fearful of me. Even 9-star Master Teachers would be crushed easily under my hands. Why would I fear someone as weak as you?" Hearing Zhang Xian doubt his strength, the heart flew into a rage. "If that's the case, why don't you let me go? Anyway, someone like me can't possibly hurt you," Zhang Xian continued. The heart pondered for a moment, and seemingly agreeing with Zhang Xian's words, he finally let go of his grasp. Even though Vicious had been one of the strongest existences in the world in the past, his fight with Kong Shi had left him severely injured. Even the many millennia of hibernation were insufficient for him to recover fully. With his current strength, possessing a celestial Master Teacher would be no easy feat. If he could convince the other party to willingly give up his body, he could be spared a lot of unnecessary trouble. Feeling the strength restraining him disappearing, Zhang Xian heaved a sigh of relief. "Ask whatever you want to, I'll grant your dying wish at the very least," the heart said. "All right." Zhang Xian nodded. Feeling the connection between his mind and his body returning, he suddenly smiled. "I would like to ask if you recognize this object." After which, a golden book suddenly appeared before him. "This? What is this?" The heart was taken aback. While he was still pondering over this bizarre question, that book suddenly crushed down on him. Following which, a frenzied howling reverberated across the entire underground chamber. Shit! What the hell? Who in the world are you? Chapter 680. Please trust me. Zhang Xian's intention was to examine what the heart was, but right after coming into contact with it, his body immediately came under the control of the other party. Left with no choice, he could only try to convince the other party to let go of him. It was a desperate attempt, but who knew that it would really work? As soon as he was released, he rushed right into the Library of Heaven's Path to check the book that was just compiled on the heart, and after taking a look, he immediately realized what was going on. Even though Vicious had described himself to be a powerful figure, he was nothing more than a fragment of his previous self. He had barely awoken from his long hibernation not too long ago, and he was still in a severely weakened state. Even if he could possess Zhang Xian, he would have to pay a heavy price for it. However, if Zhang Xian were to relinquish control over his body, Vicious would be spared a lot of trouble. In any case, this was the only opportunity Zhang Xian was going to get to deal with Vicious. He immediately whipped out the Book of Heaven's Path and activated the golden page. This was the strongest weapon he currently had in his arsenal. Even if Vicious had really come from the same era as Kongshi, it was impossible for him to withstand the wrath of heaven. As expected, with the materialization of the book, the energy from the heart that was wrapped around Zhang Xian to prevent him from escaping vanished, and he regained control over his body. Who am I? I am your grandfather! Zhang Xian roared furiously as the book smashed down on the heart. However, before the book could crush the heart, the pedestal beneath the heart shattered instead. Hong Long! With the destruction of the pedestal, the formation sustaining the entire underground chamber began collapsing. Spiritual energy from the stream began diffusing into the surroundings, and the underground chamber started to shake violently. This is bad, I forgot that this is the core of the formation. Zhang Xian's face darkened. He was too intent on dealing with Vicious and freeing himself from danger that he forgot that he was standing before the core of the formation sustaining the underground chamber. This underground chamber was relying on a huge formation to regulate the spiritual energy and reinforce the structures here, and the center of the formation just happened to be the location where the heart was placed, the pedestal. With the collapse of the pedestal, the reinforcement from the formation to prevent the underground chamber from collapsing vanished, and the ceiling began caving in on them. From his current location, it would take at least 2 to 3 minutes for him to escape from the underground chamber. Given the rate at which the underground chamber was collapsing at, it was impossible for him to escape. He would be buried alive. But at this moment, the anxious yelling of the heart crushed under the golden book sounded. Don't kill me! I can bring you to safety. Hearing those words, Zhang Xian stared at the heart hesitantly for a moment before replying. Fine, I'll trust you this once. Vicious was by no means a trustworthy person, but the dire situation Zhang Xian was in didn't grant him the luxury of choice. The underground chamber was going to collapse on him at any moment now, and it was already too late for him to escape. His only hope lay with Vicious. Given the millenniums that the other party had lived for, he might be aware of certain secrets hidden in the underground chamber. Perhaps, the other party might just know of something that could save him. Having made up his mind, Zhang Xian was about to withdraw the book when a thought suddenly struck him. I might be unable to kill him now, but I wonder if it's possible for me to seal him with the golden page. Once Zhang Xian withdraws the golden page, it would vanish. Without this weapon to keep Vicious in check, there was no saying that the latter might just renege on his promise. Since the golden page could assimilate the content of the books in the Library of Heaven's Path for his own, raise his soul depth, and slay enemies, then perhaps, it might be able to turn into something that could seal this heart too? If he could seal Vicious into the golden page somehow, he would not need to worry about the other party's retaliation. Hula! As soon as the thought emerged in his mind, the book suddenly opened up, and a brilliant pillar of light rose from the book. Wham! In an instant, the book clamped down on the heart, and the pillar of light vanished as well. It floated in the air for a few seconds before abruptly falling to the ground. Rushing forward to grab the book, Jiang Xian opened it up and saw a heart beating ceaselessly inside. Realizing that it was trapped within the book, it struggled with all its might, but it wasn't able to escape from the confine of the page. It was a mystical sight to see a beating heart within a book. "Let me go!" the heart roared savagely. Delighted to see that the Book of Heaven's Path possessed the ability to seal as well, Jiang Xian chuckled and said, "Bring me to a safe location first. I am vicious, a person whom even Kong Shi fears. How dare an impertinent ant like you treat me like that?" The heart bellowed ferociously, but before he could finish his words, he was suddenly flicked by a finger. Pun! As if struck by a bolt of lightning, the heart was sent tumbling into the depths of the page. "Your name is Vicious, isn't it? Why don't you give me a bright smile? Let me see how vicious you can get." Jiang Xian smirked. The heart twitched violently, as tears of blood threatened to flow from its atriums. To think that a day would come which he would find himself in such a position. Back then, he was the infamous Vicious who domineered the world. Even though he was still in a weakened state, having yet to recover his strength after his demise back then, the strength that he wielded was still more than sufficient for him to toy with Saint Realm experts easily. And yet here he was, sealed by a 20-year-old brat in a book, flicked around as if he was a mere toy. To hell with this. Where did my dignity as the Immortal's envoy go? Even though he had no idea what kind of artifact he was trapped in, the imposing authority of heaven harnessed by the artifact induced a deep and instinctive fear within him, rendering him helpless before it. Honestly speaking, in face of such overwhelming power, he knew that it was a blessing that he was still alive at this point. "Why? You aren't going to smile?" Just as he was bubbling with rage, he saw the other party bending his forefinger, ready to send another flick at him. The heart immediately cowered in fear. I'll smile. The heart formed a human face and smiled. What choice did he have but to submit? He was already sealed in this book, and his fate was firmly held in the other party's hands. He might have been a formidable figure in the past, but that was all history. It couldn't possibly help him now. As bright as the smile on his face was, his heart was bleeding profusely. Back then, I stood toe-to-toe with Kong Shi and crushed many 9-star master teachers. And yet, here I am, forced to smile under the commands of a mere brat. This is more like it. Now lead me to somewhere safe. Having affirmed that the other party was under his control, Jiang Xian heaved a long sigh of relief. However, this wasn't the time for him to rest yet. At this point, the ground was shaking more vehemently than ever, and the ceiling was still moments from caving in on them. Yes! Upon seeing Jiang Xian withdraw his finger, the heart heaved a sigh of relief before turning to the otherworldly demons and yelled, "Hurry up and lead the way!" Roar! Upon receiving those orders, the otherworldly demon puppet standing by the edge of the stream immediately rushed forward. Grabbing the book with Vicious in it in his hand, Jiang Xian followed closely behind those puppets. At the same time, he also established communication with his clone and urged him over. Not too long after, his clone came rushing over, and Jiang Xian hid him in his storage ring. Forged using the 9 Hearts Lotus, his clone could be said to be nearing the point of being indestructible. Even the combined might of 2 Saint Realm puppets couldn't threaten its existence. Just that, due to the severe injuries it had incurred, it would require a long rest to recuperate from its wounds. With the heart held hostage in Jiang Xian's hands, those puppets didn't dare to show the slightest disrespect to Jiang Xian. In fact, 2 of the puppets even stepped forward to carry Jiang Xian. When Saint Realm puppets sprinted as fast as they could, the speed was truly nothing to scoff at. In less than 2 breaths, they were already standing in a vast room. At this point, the underground chamber finally gave into the massive pressure and caved in. With its collapse, the room was abruptly plunged into darkness. Thus, Jiang Xian whipped out a night illumination pearl to light up the surroundings. Following which, he opened the book, and the heart immediately began explaining. This is a sanctuary we built to escape from the humans were they to enter this underground chamber. It is specially reinforced such that it will remain standing even if the underground chamber collapses. Just that, there's no exit from here. Back then, After the otherworldly demonic tribe lost the war, their army was expelled from the Master Teacher continent, while the remnants were hunted down. As one of the top leaders of the otherworldly demons, Vicious had prepared a sanctuary in advance for such a situation. Even if humans were to find his hiding location, he would be able to kill them all by collapsing the underground chamber while he hid in this sanctuary. However, to prevent anyone from finding this underground chamber, there was only one entrance and exit. While they were still safe for now, it was hard to say whether they would be able to get out of here or not. There's no exit? Zhang Xian frowned. If there was no exit here, wouldn't it be a matter of time before he suffocated to death? That's right, the heart replied. Is that the case? Since I can't get out, I might as well absorb you to raise my cultivation. Zhang Xian raised his palm and pressed it down against the page. The Book of Heaven's Path had sealed Vicious' abilities, thus rendering him completely helpless before Zhang Xian. Wait a moment. The heart was on the verge of tears. Back then, there was no one who didn't fear him, not even the most ferocious demon in hell nor Kong Shi. And yet, this fellow actually threatened to beat him up and absorb him. The sudden reversal in his position left him so frustrated that he found himself losing his mind. But throwing a tantrum would be useless now. Judging from the other party's attitude, he might really just end up being absorbed by the other party. What the hell was this? It wasn't easy for him to wake up from his hibernation, and he thought that he could finally slowly recover his strength and rule the world. And yet, before he could even leave the underground chamber, he just had to meet with this kind of pervert possessing such a monstrous artifact. Even the great Codex of Spring and Autumn that Kong Shi went to great lengths to craft, which was said to harness the ability to reverse yin-yang and alter the flow of time, didn't seem to be this powerful. Just who was this fellow? Where in the world did he pop up from? There's indeed no exit, but it's possible to dig a way out. However, it might take a few days. The heart quickly placated Zhang Xian's worries for fear of being absorbed. Dig a way out? True. You should hurry up and get those puppets of yours to work then. Zhang Xian waved his hands casually. Considering how they were able to excavate such a huge underground chamber in the first place, it shouldn't come as a surprise that they would be able to dig a passageway out either. And since there were so many puppets here, there was no need for Zhang Xian to work personally either. All right, the heart replied. He used an unknown means to communicate with the puppets, and they started to dig upward. These puppets were commanded might equivalent to a Saint Realm expert, so digging a tunnel for a human to pass through wasn't too difficult. However, the tricky part was that the underground chamber had just collapsed, so the surrounding ground was a little unstable at the moment. If they weren't careful, the sanctuary could collapse as well. While the puppets were busy digging a path out, Zhang Xian waited patiently below. He turned his attention to the book once more. All right, I have some questions I would like to ask you. Answer me honestly. Yes, the heart replied. Since you came from the same era as Kong Shi and even exchanged blows with him, have you ever heard of his innate fetal poison? Zhang Xian asked. Through the Library of Heaven's Path, Zhang Xian could tell that Vicious was telling the truth. He did belong to the same era as Kong Shi, so there was a chance that he might know about the innate fetal poison. Innate fetal poison? I'm not too sure either. Kong Shi and I were enemies, and he was already considerably strong in the first time we met. The heart replied. In that era, the otherworldly demonic tribe dominated the humans and all other races. It was during that period of time that Kong Shi suddenly rose to power. Even from a very young age, he wielded exceptional strength surpassing that of most otherworldly demons. Under his leadership, the armies of humanity were rallied in a campaign against the otherworldly demons, and eventually, humanity emerged victorious in that war. Are you certain that you don't know anything about that? Are you lying to me? Zhang Xian narrowed his eyes. I dare not. The heart hurriedly explained, but before he could finish his words, he was flicked by the other party's finger once more. Ah! Pum. As if struck by a bolt of lightning, he was sent spinning in the Book of Heaven's Path, and his body convulsed violently from the impact. White foam began leaking out from the heart. "This is nothing. If I ever find out that you are hiding something from me, I'll kill you," Jiang Xian said. "Yes." Red tears streamed down the heart as it trembled in agitation. "I really am vicious, the vicious who dominated the ancient era, the vicious whom even Kong Shi feared. Please trust me." Chapter 681. Qin Zhong. After asking a few more questions, Jiang Xian finally closed the book. The fellow was indeed unaware of the matters surrounding Kong Shi's innate fetal poison, so it was impossible for Jiang Xian to get anything out of him. Being poisoned was a sign of weakness. One would hide it even from one's allies, not to mention one's enemies. This was similar to how Jiang Xian had never told anyone that he was poisoned. Most likely, Kong Shi back then was the same as well. But in any case, through the questioning session, Jiang Xian did manage to understand the true reason for that fellow being reduced to a mere heart, and the real purpose behind this underground chamber. The previous host of the heart did wield destructive power, and he did dominate the world at one time. Countless humans had died by his hand. Kong Shi had fought him several times, but the other party always managed to successfully get away. It was only at the very last battle that after several days of combat, Kong Shi finally managed to tear apart his flesh and bones and dissipate his soul. He had indeed died, but as one of the strongest experts of that era, one of the leaders of the otherworldly demon, how could he possibly have no aces up his sleeves? Before fighting with Kong Shi, he had already left behind a drop of blood in this underground chamber in case anything happened. And to protect that drop of blood, he dispatched an entire army of otherworldly demons to guard it. After the passing of many millenniums, the drop of blood finally developed and metamorphosed into a heart. Slowly, he roused from his sleep, regaining consciousness. He thought that he would very soon be able to rule the world, but before he could even get out from his hiding spot, he just had to meet with Jiang Xian and end up being sealed in that book, becoming an existence that was little more than a picture. As for those puppets, even though they had lost sentience, they were still his descendants. Their otherworldly demon instincts allowed him to easily control them and have them work for his resurrection. At this point, a thought suddenly emerged in Jiang Xian's mind. Wu Yangzi thought that he had succeeded in his ploy by turning these otherworldly demons into puppets. But could it be possible that the otherworldly demons had already noticed what he was up to, but still chose to go along with it anyway? There were only 20 otherworldly demon puppets here, and they were all male. Clearly, it was impossible for them to reproduce anymore. Could they have intentionally allowed Wu Yangzi to turn them into puppets so that they could guard Vicious? If so, they would be able to retain their cultivation while further tempering their defenses. More importantly, they would be able to continue carrying out Vicious' order and protect him. Perhaps, they might even be revived once Vicious regained his strength. After all, as a race who had once dominated the entire Master-Teacher continent, how could none of them have noticed something at all? But, of course, this was just a theory on Jiang Xian's part, and it was impossible to verify his conjecture anymore. Wu Yangzi died before the heart regained consciousness, and the otherworldly demons involved in the incident back then were either dead or turned into puppets. From his answers, Jiang Xian realized that even though Vicious had regained consciousness, his memory hadn't completely returned yet. Many of his memories were fragmented, making it impossible for him to go into detail regarding certain matters. This was especially so for cultivation techniques. After having sealed Vicious in the book, this was one of the first few thoughts that came to mind. However, it was a pity, but the other party only knew cultivation techniques that were exclusive to otherworldly demons. This made Jiang Xian extremely frustrated. He thought that he would be able to obtain quite a few cultivation techniques after capturing an ancient monster and level up swiftly. Who knew that the other party would turn out to be so useless? Jiang Xian had to punch the other party a few more times before he was able to quell his frustration. After asking all of the relevant questions, Jiang Xian noted that it would still take some time before the puppets would finish digging a passageway. Thus, he sat down on the floor and began to cultivate. Even though he had only cultivated the first incandescence of the quintuple incandescence golden body, The might of his physical body had increased from 2 million ding to 4 million ding. Adding in the 4 million ding from his Jinqi and 3,200,000 ding from his soul cultivation, his overall strength added up to 11,200,000 ding. That was comparable to a transcendent mortal 7-dan perfect harmonization realm pinnacle expert. Perfect harmonization realm primary stage 8 million ding, intermediate stage 9 million ding, advanced stage 10 million ding, and pinnacle 11 million ding. Despite being only at Transcendent Mortal 5-dan Consonant Spirit Realm Pinnacle, Zhang Xian actually wielded strength 2 realms beyond him. Even the most talented geniuses of the Master Teacher Academy were incapable of such a feat, as the remaining 4 incandescents were flawed and required some kind of artifact to cultivate. Zhang Xian could only put the thought of cultivating his physical body away from the moment. He continued to refine his Jinqi and accumulate more Jinqi in his Dantian. It has been 5 days. Looking at the huge depression below her, Luo Qiqi shook her head with irrepressible gloom. 5 days had passed, and she had yet to sleep at all. She had been waiting here intently, hoping that Zhang Shi would produce another miracle and emerge from the ground, but it seemed like miracles wouldn't be miracles if they happened as and when one willed it. Even a transcendent mortal 8-dan wouldn't be able to survive so long being buried underground. Yu Fei also looked a little dazed. When the other party was right by her side, she dearly wanted to charge forward to bite off the other party's flesh. And yet, at this moment, the very thought of the other party being dead felt like a sharp knife pressed against her heart. Even though the body of a transcendent mortal was far stronger than ordinary humans, buried several hundred meters underground, crushed by rocks and suffocated, 3 to 4 hours was likely the limit. To remain alive after several days was completely impossible. In other words, Zhang Shi was really dead this time. There was no doubt about it. Gritting her teeth, Yu Fei stood up slowly and said quietly, "I'll go to the Beast Hall to borrow an aerial spirit beast and return to Hongyuan City as soon as possible. I'll report this matter to my father and have him send some men over. Even though Xing Yuan and the others might be able to mobilize the experts of the academy, I fear that they won't put their all into finding Zhang Shi. It wasn't a solution for them to continue waiting here. The only course of action they could take now was to find a Saint Realm expert to help them dig up the underground chamber. Regardless of whether Zhang Shi was dead or alive, they were determined to find him. The experts from the academy might come for the otherworldly demons and Wu Yangzi, but it would be nigh impossible to convince them to help look around for Zhang Xian. While Zhang Xian was a member of the academy in name, he hadn't passed the entrance examination nor reported to the academy yet. Thus, there was no reason for a busy Saint Realm expert to waste his time finding a nobody. Not to mention, the other party was very likely dead already. All right. Luo Qiqi nodded slowly. After waiting for 5 days, she also understood that it was unlikely for Zhang Shi to emerge alive anymore. As his student, the least she could do was unearth his body and bury him properly so that he could rest in peace. Yu Fei did a rough calculation before saying, "The Huanyu Empire Beast Hall is located not too far away from here. As long as we sprint with all our might, we should be able to reach it in around half a day." "Half a day? There's no need for it. We are standing at a point where those traveling between the Beast Hall and Huanyu Capital have to pass through. We can try to hitch a ride here," Luo Qiqi said as she glanced at the sky. Even though they weren't too far away from the Beast Hall, they had to traverse across treacherous terrain, and it was highly likely they would meet spirit beasts lurking in the area as well. If they were to accidentally catch the attention of the spirit beasts while passing through the area, the half-a-day journey could easily drag on for 3 days. Since that was the case, it would be wiser for them to pay a passerby and hitch a convenient ride to the Beast Hall. Since they were standing at a point between the Beast Hall and Huanyu Capital, there were often many aerial spirit beasts flying through the area. Perhaps very soon, they might be able to find one to ride. If so, they would be able to reach their destination within half an hour, thus sparing them a lot of trouble. Yu Fei nodded. Very coincidentally, the sound of something whizzing through the sky and the flapping of wings suddenly echoed in the sky. Raising her gaze, she saw a massive green-leaf-winged dragon beast flying toward them. Green-leaf-winged dragon beast? This is a consonant spirit realm spirit beast that possesses the dragon bloodline. It is one of the better spirit beasts even when comparing the entire beast hall. Let's take this then. After taking a closer look at the appearance of the spirit beast, Luo Qiqi immediately gathered her Junqi in a dantian before shouting. I am Master Teacher Luo Qiqi. My friend and I wish to hitch a ride on your spirit beast. The identity of a master teacher was prestigious, and it was more likely that the other party would be willing to help after she reported it. As expected, after hearing her words, the green-leaf-winged dragon beast circled the sky for a moment before descending to the ground, right before the duo. Instead of a usual lodging room on the back of the spirit beast, there was only a shabby rope. As soon as the green-leaf-winged dragon beast landed on the ground, a young man immediately leaped off its back. The young man looked to be in his 30s, and he was dressed extravagantly. His eyes had a sharpness within them that felt a little uncomfortable to look at. Just like Luo Qiqi and Yufei, he was a Cosmos Bridge realm expert as well. Beast Hall's Qin Zhong pays respect to Luo Shi. Not expecting that the ones who wished to hitch a ride would be such beautiful ladies, Qin Zhong's eyes immediately lit up in agitation. Despite his identity, he had never met ladies as beautiful as this. The both of us wish to hitch a ride on your spirit beast to visit the Beast Hall. May I know if you're willing to do us this favor? Luo Qiqi asked. It's my pleasure to take the both of you with me, Qin Zhong said excitedly. Just that, there is no lodging room on my spirit beast, so this ride might be a little uncomfortable for you too. That isn't a problem. Luo Qiqi shook her head. Their current aim was to return to Hongyuan Empire as soon as possible so as to rally help to find Zhang Xian. Comfort was the least of their worries now. May I know what an acceptable price for you is? Yufei asked. It was customary for one to pay after hitching a ride. Usually, the price would be agreed on by both sides beforehand so as to avoid complications after the ride. There's no need to stand on ceremony. It's my pleasure to have such beautiful ladies on board my spirit beast. How can I accept your money? Qin Zhong placed his hands behind his back and put on his most dashing face in hopes of attracting the other party's attention. However, the other party didn't seem to have noticed it at all. We'll feel more at ease if you accept our payment. Seeing the flirtatious looks from the other party, Luo Qiqi could tell that he had other thoughts in mind, and she frowned in displeasure. If not for the urgent situation at hand, she would never have bothered herself with such an arrogant fellow. This? Upon Luo Qiqi's insistence, Qin Zhong hesitated for a moment before replying. How about this? You two seem to have spent quite some time in the mountains already. If you two accompany me for a meal at the Beast Hall, that'll suffice as the payment. Accompany you for a meal? How could Luo Qiqi and Yufei possibly not know what the other party was thinking about? It was already as clear as day. Their faces immediately darkened. How dare this fellow from the Huanyu Empire Beast Hall attempt to philander with two 5-star master teachers? How brazen! That's right. Don't worry, I don't have any other thoughts in mind. Besides, considering how the both of you are in such a hurry to the Beast Hall, you must be trying to find a formidable aerial spirit beast to ride on. As a 4-star beast tamer and the son of the incumbent hall master, I'm sure I will be able to help the both of you. Qin Zhong smiled proudly. As long as he made his identity as the young master of the Beast Hall known, most people would immediately show some respect to him. Even if the young ladies were master teachers, judging from their age, they couldn't possibly be ranked above 3-star. After learning his identity, he was confident that the duo would surely think differently of him. And before long, there would be 2 ladies in his embrace. Chapter 682, Zhang Xian appears. Pick another condition! Seeing that the other party was actually interested in them, Luo Qiqi frowned and waved her hands in disapproval. If not for the other party being the young master of the Beast Hall, she would surely have slapped that thought out of him by now. They were both 5-star master teachers, not to mention Yufei was the princess of Hongyuan Empire, so how dare a mere 4-star beast tamer try to take advantage of them? But regardless, the two of them didn't know much about beast taming, and the other party seemed to be the vindictive type who would get back at them if they were to offend him. Thus, Luo Qiqi chose to hold herself back. Pick another condition? Not expecting the two ladies to reject even a meal, Qin Zhong frowned. He took pride in his looks and identity, and very few had ever rejected his invitation before. They were the ones who had requested something of him, and yet, not only did they reject his invitation, they even had such displeased looks on their faces. What did they mean by this? They were thinking too highly of themselves. Qin Zhong harumphed coldly. It's just a casual meal, surely there's no need for you to turn me down like this, right? If you were to continue acting so coldly and distant, I fear that it'll be difficult for you to get a good aerial spirit beast when you arrive at the beast hall. Luo Qiqi narrowed her eyes. What do you mean by that? Are you trying to threaten us? Do you know the consequences of threatening a master teacher? Threaten? How could I possibly dare to threaten a master teacher? I'm just giving you a word of advice out of goodwill on my part. Besides, you are the ones who asked to hitch a ride. Is this the kind of attitude one should put on when asking for a favor? Qin Zhong chuckled playfully as he gazed at the duo. I have already stated my price, it's your choice to accept it or not. In any case, I am in no hurry. As long as I am here, I doubt anyone in the entire Beast Hall will be willing to offer you a ride. Seeing the other party acting so despicably, how could a person with an explosive temper like Euphrasia possibly hold herself back? Sneering coldly, she stepped forward so as to teach that shameless man a lesson and pummel into him the fact that there were some people in the world he should never offend. But at that moment, the sound of dirt being overturned sounded from the huge depression below. Gugga gugga. Dirt was hurled continuously into the air, as if a gigantic bubble was trying to break out from the earth. Could it be? Euphrasia and Luo Qiqi's bodies immediately stiffened. At this moment, they couldn't be bothered with that arrogant fellow anymore. Their eyes stared intently at the depression, willing for the person they were hoping for to appear. Could he really be alive? Was he going to create another miracle as he always did and climb out from the ground alive? The duo's eyes turned crimson at that thought. They had spent 5 entire days here, and in this duration, the spark of hope they once held on to slowly withered into despair. And right when they were about to let go of the final sliver of hope, such an incident occurred. Gulong! Just as their hearts were hanging with anxiety, the dirt on the surface of the ground finally broke open, and a massive head emerged. Puppet! The bodies of the two ladies became tense, and their faces immediately flushed ghastly pale. They'd thought that it would be Zhang Shi, but who knew that it would be this puppet instead? Who? The puppet climbed out from the hole and stood up. Then, it scanned the surroundings warily, as though waiting for someone. Seeing that there wasn't the slightest injury on this puppet, Luo Qiqi and Euphrasia felt as if a knife had torn through their hearts. Zhang Shi had sacrificed his own life so that the puppets would remain buried for all eternity to come, but it seemed like his sacrifice had ended in futility. On the other hand, Qin Zhong, who was waiting for the two beauties before him to submit, saw that the duo had ignored him and turned their attention to the depression instead. Frowning, he turned his gaze over as well, and his eyebrows shot up. What the heck was that fellow? Why would he suddenly appear from the ground? Even though Qin Zhong was a 4-star beast tamer, the matter regarding the otherworldly demonic tribe was one of the greatest secrets of the continent, so he didn't know too much about them. Not to mention, the otherworldly demon puppets did resemble humans in some respects, albeit being slightly larger. A normal otherworldly demon was only 2 meters tall. The only reason the otherworldly demon which Zhang Xian met in Myriad Kingdom City reached 3 meters and was less humanly was because it was a hybrid between the otherworldly demonic tribe and a spirit beast. Even though it was rare to meet someone 2 meters tall, it wasn't something to make a fuss over. Isn't he just a little taller than average? He looks rather weak. Do these two ladies prefer this type of man? Seeing how the two beautiful ladies before him had ignored him and were getting excited before that tall man, Qin Zhong's face reddened, and a glint flashed across his eyes. That fellow is just a little taller than average. Let me show you that height is nothing at all. With such thoughts in mind, Qin Zhong stepped forward, and with a proud gaze he said, I am Qin Zhong, a 4-star beast tamer from the Beast Hall. My friend over there, may I know how to address you? Is it convenient for you to come up to have a chat? Just as Luo Qiqi and Yu Fei were overwhelmed by grief and shock, they suddenly heard those words and froze. Was there something wrong with this fellow's head? Chat with an otherworldly demon? How could Qin Zhong be sure that he knew how to speak human language? Seeing the dumbfounded expression on the duo, Qin Zhong thought that he was on the right track, and his eyes lit up. Turning his gaze back to the tall fellow below, he realized that the latter wasn't even looking at him. Furious, he howled. What? Are you looking down on me? Fine, I'm interested to see what you are capable of anyway. After saying this, the green-leaf winged dragon beast roared and flew into the sky. Qin Zhong leaped onto the back of his tamed beast, and the duo swooped downward to the tall fellow below. You chose that tall fellow over me? Fine, I'll beat him up right now and let you know how bad your eyes are. Halfway through the arc, Qin Zhong leaped off from the spirit beast. His robe fluttered along with the tug of the wind as he charged toward that tall fellow. He had used his strongest movement technique in this leap. At this moment, he looked like he was gliding through the air, creating a dashing scene. Through this movement technique, he had incited the excited screams of innumerable beautiful ladies. Halfway through his movement, he raised his gaze to peek at the two beautiful ladies, hoping to see eyes gleaming with excitement and admiration. But who knew that those two ladies would actually shake their heads in pity and close their eyes? Closing your eyes? Is my performance insufficient to awe you? Just as Qin Zhong was perplexed by the bizarre situation, he had already arrived before the puppet. Before he could do anything, he suddenly saw a huge fist rapidly expanding before his eyes. Pun! A powerful force struck his body, and he suddenly felt a stifling sensation in his chest. Blood spurted profusely from his mouth, and his figure rapidly retreated through the air. Strength that exceeds transcendent mortal 8 Dan. Qin Zhong's vision turned dark, and he nearly went insane. The strength of the otherworldly demon puppets was derived from their physical bodies, making it nearly impossible for Qin Zhong to accurately gauge the other party's true strength and capability. Nevertheless, taking pride in his ability, he thought that it would be a piece of cake for him to take down the other party. Never had he expected for the other party to be so powerful. It felt like he was standing against the raging storms of a boundless ocean. Even his father, the Hall Master of the Beast Hall, a transcendent mortal 8 Dan pinnacle expert, didn't wield such prowess. But if that was the case, wouldn't that mean that the other party's strength had already exceeded transcendent mortal 8 Dan? How could that be? He had met all of the transcendent mortal 8 Dan experts of Huanyu Empire, but he didn't recall one of them being of such tall stature. Only after spurting several large mouthfuls of blood did he finally feel the stifling sensation in his chest alleviate slightly. His back crashed heavily against the edge of the depression, and the bones throughout his entire body rattled. Just a single fist, and he was already severely injured. If not for the several life-preservation artifacts that he had activated in the midst of his trajectory, he just might have died from that single fist. But even so, the injuries he had sustained would take at least a month or two to heal. Struggling to open his eyes, Qin Zhong was just about to summon his winged dragon beast to take him away when he saw yet another tall fellow climbing out from the hole, and the both of them stood respectfully beside the hole. Are they trying to welcome someone? Seeing the attitude of the two tall fellows, Qin Zhong was taken aback. However, the bizarreness didn't stop here. After which, more tall fellows emerged from the hole, and they stood on the both sides of the hole. With their heads lowered, it seemed like they were waiting patiently for the arrival of some important person. Finally, after the appearance of the 18th tall man, a sedan chair slowly emerged from the hole. Seated on top of the sedan chair was a young man, and upon seeing the sunlight outside, he stretched his back lazily. It seemed like he had been deprived of sunlight for many days and was delighted to see it once more. To be carried by 4 transcendent mortal 8 Dan experts while another 18 stood at attention to welcome him. Who in the world was this fellow? And why did he appear from the ground? Qin Zhong widened his eyes in bewilderment. For an instant, he forgot about the overwhelming pain he was suffering. At that moment, an excited call suddenly came from above, and two figures immediately leaped into the depression. Zhang Shi. Luo Qiqi and Yu Feier had thought that they would never meet this young man ever again. Who could have thought that he would actually appear before them in such a fashion? Unable to hold back their agitation, they rushed forward without any hesitation. The depression was around 40 meters deep, but this height was nothing to a Cosmos Bridge realm expert. Little Qi and Princess Feier, what are you two doing here? Naturally, the man seated on the sedan was Zhang Xian. After 5 days of effort, the puppets had finally unearthed a passageway for him to leave the underground chamber. In any case, since their leader was in his hands, these fellows had no choice but to obey his words. Thus, he had them prepare a sedan chair to carry him up. Zhang Xian thought that after so many days, the two ladies would have already left. As such, he was surprised to see them here. You are fine. After confirming that the other party was indeed Zhang Shi, Luo Qiqi and Yu Feier were finally able to release the huge burden that had been weighing down on their hearts over the past few days. But after recovering from their agitation, many doubts started to emerge in their minds. Wasn't he chased by the puppets when they left? Why would the puppets be carrying him out now? More importantly, with the collapse of the underground chamber, the supply of oxygen inside was cut off entirely. How did he manage to survive for so long? I'm fine. It's a long story. Zhang Xian waved his hands. I thought that I would surely die back then, but I happened to activate an artifact that my teacher left for me then. Through the effects of the artifact, not only did I survive the collapse, these puppets were also put under my control. Honestly speaking, I was truly lucky to have survived this. There was no way he could talk about the heart. Otherwise, he would have to explain how he managed to seal the heart in his Book of Heaven's Path too. Thus, he chose to push everything onto that imaginary teacher of his. In any case, the duo had seen his teacher's astounding performance back at the cleansing lake too, so it wouldn't be too difficult for them to believe this either. Yan Shi? Luo Qiqi and Yu Feier glanced at one another before heaving a sigh of relief simultaneously. The image of Yang Shi descending for the sky and resolving the huge catastrophe with the single throw of a shoe was still inscribed deeply in their minds. Not even Mo Shi would have been capable of doing the same. It wasn't entirely inconceivable for that legendary figure to tame all of the puppets given his means. It's enough that you are fine. Since a high-ranked master teacher was involved in this matter, they knew that it wouldn't be appropriate for them to pry into this matter. Thus, they decided to put this topic away. Seeing the duo putting aside the matter, Zhang Xian heaved a sigh of relief. At that moment, he suddenly noticed Qin Zhong, whose face was swollen red from the punch earlier, and he frowned in confusion. Who is this fellow? Chapter 683, Can You Fly? He is... After a moment of hesitation, Luo Qiqi began recounting the matters earlier. You wish to get an aerial spirit beast to travel back to Hongyuan Empire? Zhang Xian nodded in agreement. Indeed, 5 days have passed. I really should hurry to Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy. After leaving the cleansing lake, Zhang Xian had spent 3 days in a coma, 1 day in the underground chamber, and 5 days digging a path out of it. All in all, it had been 9 days since then. If he didn't hurry now, he might miss the entrance examination to the academy. While he didn't think that it was truly necessary for him to enroll at the Master Teacher Academy, considering the history behind it, the latter must have a huge collection of books. If he could gain access to them, he could potentially raise his cultivation quickly. Luo Qiqi nodded. Since teacher is fine, let's return together. The reason why they wanted to rush back earlier was to save Zhang Shi. But while the latter was fine now, it was indeed about time for them to return too. All right. Getting up from the sedan chair, Zhang Xian had the puppets march back down the hole before burying it entirely. On the surface, it seemed like Zhang Xian was ordering them to return to the underground chamber, but in truth, Zhang Xian's soul was waiting below to place them into his storage ring. As these fellows were lifeless puppets, he could carry them along with him in his storage ring. Since he could control these fellows through the heart, it would be waste for him not to keep them around. With this huge army of Saint Realm puppets, he could easily destroy even a real Saint Realm cultivator. With this, his safety in Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy would be assured, and he wouldn't have to keep relying on Yang Shi either. But of course, any matter regarding otherworldly demons was of grave importance, and it was best to keep Luo Qiqi and Yu Fei in the dark regarding this matter as well. Not to mention, there was an outsider lying not too far away. This was the reason why he decided to go through so much trouble to keep his action of storing them in his storage ring a secret. This way, he could avoid unnecessary trouble in the future. As for whether the experts of the academy would be able to find the puppets after they arrived, that was none of his business. After all, the puppets were capable of moving. The experts couldn't possibly expect for the puppets to wait patiently at the same spot. Having made up his mind to leave, Zhang Xian immediately turned to the battered Qin Zhong and said, "Your name is Qin Zhong, right? We wish to hitch a ride on your spirit beast, so I ask of your cooperation." "All right." Struggling to his feet, Qin Zhong looked at Zhang Xian as a hint of envy and rage flashed across his eyes. The reason why he was beaten up like that was due to this fellow. He had no idea who those tall fellows were, but considering the respect they had shown to this young man, it was likely that he was the mastermind behind his current pathetic plight. "Humph, I may be no match for you here, but let's see how well you'll fare when we are in the air." Qin Zhong swallowed his pill and drove his cultivation. A moment later, he felt that his injuries had alleviated slightly. Looking at the trio before him now, even though they hadn't utilized their Jinqi, so he was unable to determine their exact cultivation, considering their age, it was impossible for them to have reached sainthood. And as long as one hadn't reached sainthood, one would be incapable of flight. "There is no lodging room on top of my spirit beast, and the wind has been strong lately." Qin Zhong stood up and leaped onto the back of his tamed beast, while he kind-heartedly warned them to be careful. On the inside, he was snickering gleefully. "That's no problem," Zhang Xian replied nonchalantly. "Who?" The green-leaf-winged dragon beast flapped its wings and rose up into the air. Even though there was no lodging room on top of the aerial spirit beast, its back was rather spacious. It wasn't cramped even with all four of them standing on top. The spirit beast flew higher and higher, and soon, they were soaring through the clouds. Due to the incredible speed of their flight, a cold gale pressed tightly against their skin. The group had to gather their Jinqi to form a protective layer to ward off the strong wind. Seeing the look of nonchalance on the young man, Yu Fei couldn't help but ask worriedly, "Zhang Xian, that fellow obviously harbors malicious intentions. Why did you still ask to hitch a ride?" Even she could tell that the beast tamer was up to no good. If it was her, she would have ignored the other party and left immediately. Besides, they had nothing urgent on at the moment. At the very most, they could just walk to the beast hall. There was no need for them to take this risk in the first place. After all, they would be helpless if the other party were to try something in midair. "Aren't you normally extremely intelligent? So, why did you make such an elementary mistake?" Luo Qiqi chuckled. "Fei, just watch on. Teacher knows what he is doing." Yu Fei was unaware of it, but Luo Qiqi had once witnessed Zhang Xian flying in the sky. Since Zhang Xian chose to hitch a ride, he must have a plan in mind. Zhang Shi getting done in by someone else? You must be kidding. In the times accompanying him, Luo Qiqi had only seen him doing others in. Not once had she witnessed him being done in before. Damn it! Seeing the two cold-faced ladies who were unwilling to even spout a single word to him getting friendly with that average-looking fellow, Qin Zhong's face twisted in anger. As the young master of the Beast Hall, he grew up with a golden spoon in his mouth. Not to mention, he was also blessed with good looks and considerable talent, so he had always been admired and respected by others. When had he ever allowed another to hitch a ride even after he was pummeled? This was a huge humiliation. Little brother, were those tall fellows from before your subordinates? But even so, Qin Zhong knew that making a move without knowing the background of his enemy was nothing short of recklessness. The tall fellow whom he faced possessed might exceeding that of a transcendent mortal 8-dan expert. While he understood that the wiser decision was to stay out of the other party's way, he was reluctant to simply let this matter go, especially after the humiliation he had suffered. Thus, he decided to first attempt to understand the other party's background before deciding on what he should do. "No, he's just a friend who was sending me out," Zhang Xian replied nonchalantly. "A friend?" Qin Zhong frowned. "Then may I know how to address you, and where do you come from?" This question was a little more direct. "I'm not anything much, so I don't think Qin Gongzi will have heard of me," Zhang Xian replied. "Not anything much?" Qin Zhong sneered coldly. That was true as well. He had met nearly all of the renowned young geniuses of Huanyu Empire, but he had never met the young man before him. Thus, it was unlikely for him to be a formidable figure. Nevertheless, he should still tread carefully. "Then, may I know if you have studied the way of master teachers?" he continued asking. "Yes, I have. It has been around half a year since I started learning the way of master teachers." Zhang Xian scratched his head in embarrassment. He was speaking the truth. Less than half a year had passed since he first took the master teacher examination in Tianwu Kingdom. Half a year? Considering how vast and profound the way of master teachers is, it is indeed difficult for you to learn anything substantial in half a year. Even so, you need not feel bad about yourself. Considering how the two beautiful ladies were master teachers, he thought that this young man would be a master teacher as well. However, after hearing that the latter had only been in the occupation for half a year, he couldn't help but sneer in derision inside. Every single occupation of the 9 paths had a whole heritage of knowledge that one had to devote one's entire life to studying before they could master it. This was especially so for master teachers, as the number 1 occupation in the world. Half a year. Even at best, he could only be an apprentice now. Since the other party wasn't a master teacher, there would be no need for Qin Zhong to hold himself back then. "Judging from how valiant little brother looks, could the reason you studied the way of master teachers so late is because you went to study other occupations? What about pill forging? Are you well versed in it?" Qin Zhong continued asking. "I have studied it for a few days," Zhang Xian replied. "A few days? That's such a pity. Learning pill forging can to temper one's mind, allowing one to focus their concentration and cultivate better. You lost an opportunity to cultivate a good habit." Qin Zhong sighed before continuing. "What about beast taming?" "I have dabbled in it a bit," Zhang Xian answered. "Beast taming can allow one to come into contact with nature. Dabbling in it a bit won't be sufficient for you to learn anything significant. You lost an opportunity to become closer to nature." Qin Zhong shook his head. "What about medicine, smithing, and formation?" Soon, Qin Zhong went through all of the upper 9 paths, but it seemed like the other party wasn't well versed in any of them. Eventually, after confirming that the other party hadn't achieved anything substantial in any occupation, his confidence immediately burst through the roof. Most formidable experts would choose to take on several occupations and persevere in them. Yet, this fellow only learned each of them for a few days. Considering his lack of patience, it was certain that he wouldn't be able to achieve anything great. Since that was the case, what did he have to worry about? Chuckling lightly, Qin Zhong instructed. "Ha! Everyone, make sure you have a stable footing. I'm going to speed up now." Following which, the green-leaf-winged dragon beast flapped its powerful wings and surged across the sky. Voila! The abrupt increase in speed along with the intense movements of the spirit beast caused Yu Feier and Luo Qiqi immediately lose their balance, and they nearly fell from the back of the spirit beast. To a beast tamer, dealing with the passengers riding on his aerial spirit beast was a walk in the park. "You!" Realizing what the other party was up to, Yu Feier's face turned scarlet, and she nearly exploded in rage. Just as she was about to bellow angrily, she suddenly felt a surge of Jinqi behind her that stabilized her footing. Turning around, she saw Zhang Xian's outstretched hand supporting her back. It seemed like the sudden vigorous movements of the winged dragon beast didn't have much of an effect on this young man. Qin Zhong thought that he could make that wastrel beg for forgiveness through shaking up the ride, but the other party maintained a nonchalant expression, seemingly not afraid at all. Qin Zhong's face immediately darkened once more. If he couldn't even make the other party scared, how could he exact his vengeance? Just as he was about to order the winged dragon beast to perform 2 360-degree turns, he suddenly heard the young man asking calmly, "Brother Qin, there is a question I have been wanting to ask you all along. Do you know how to fly?" Fly? Not expecting the other party to ask such a question, Qin Zhong was taken aback. Flight is an ability that only saints are capable of. How can I possibly be able to fly? Following which, the apologetic voice of the young man was heard once more. I see. I have neglected to tell you this, but I am able to fly. You are? Qin Zhong had no idea where the other party was going with this. However, at this very moment, a thunder-like boom sounded. Moo! Hoo! As soon as the sound reverberated in the air, Qin Zhong immediately felt the winged dragon beast beneath him stiffening, and it began to fall to the ground. Ah! Scared out of his wits, Qin Zhong screamed in fear. The aerial spirit beast beneath him was suddenly paralyzed, and he was incapable of flight. If he were to descend from an altitude of 1,000 meters, he would be immediately brought to death's door. Amidst his screams, he suddenly heard the young man's calm voice speaking by his ear. I don't know what kind of opportunities one have lost, but I do know that being incapable of flight has cost you your opportunity to live. Lifting his gaze, he saw the young man looking at him impassively. The other party was floating in the air with the two ladies from before standing quietly by his side, supported by his jinchi. Flight? Never could he have expected for the young man who had only studied a few days in every single occupation to actually be capable of flight. What the heck was this? If he knew that the other party was capable of flight, he wouldn't have gone through all of that. Qin Zhong cried. Chapter 684, Reunion with Hall Master Han. You can fly? Seeing as the man and the beast fell through the sky, creating large mushroom-shaped clouds upon impact, Yu Fei turned to look at the young man beside her with widened eyes as if she had seen a ghost. Wasn't flight an ability exclusive to saints? As a consonant spirit realm cultivator, how was he doing this? Recalling Luo Qiqi's fearless demeanor previously, Yu Fei suddenly realized something and asked, Qiqi, you knew of this in advance? Back in the underground chamber, Zhang Laoshi used this technique to save me once, Luo Qiqi said. With a curious gaze, she turned to Zhang Xian and asked, Speaking of which, teacher, why are you able to fly? Actually, she had been wanting to ask this question all along, but there wasn't a suitable opportunity before. If it were to be known that someone beneath sainthood was capable of flight, it would surely leave the blood of many running wild in agitation. But at the same time, it could possibly spell trouble for Zhang Xian. It is an artifact that my teacher gave me. Actually, rather than flight, calling it a temporary tool for gliding would be more exact. Furthermore, it has its flaws as well. For one, it has a high jinchi consumption, so I can't sustain it for too long. Since there was no way Zhang Xian could explain this well either, he decided to dump everything onto Yang Xian, as per usual. Artifact? Yang Shi is indeed amazing. Hearing that it was another one of Yang Shi's doing, the duo's eyes immediately lit up in excitement. Considering how many valuable artifacts Yang Shi had given Zhang Xian, it seemed like he truly valued the latter a lot. Seeing that he had managed to get the duo off his hook after bringing his teacher into the picture, Zhang Xian smiled in relief. This artifact is rather rare, so I ask you two not to tell others about it so as to avoid unnecessary trouble. Luo Qiqi and Yu Fei nodded in response. Don't worry. It was an unspoken rule for one to not speak of the affairs of a high-ranked master teacher unless a compelling situation warranted it. Besides, they also didn't wish to bring trouble to Zhang Shi either. As the trio spoke, they gradually landed on the ground. Zhang Xian exhaled a large mouthful of turbid air. With his current cultivation, he could easily maintain flight for over an hour. However, holding on to two people with his jinchi in the midst of his flight was still rather tough on him. It was fortunate that he only had to bring them down and not proceed forward, or else he might just end up plummeting to the ground just like Qin Zhong. Is that fellow dead? Luo Qiqi asked. Not too far away from the trio, there was a huge pit with a man and a spirit beast lying inside. The beast was still able to retain its consciousness, but the man, as he was already inflicted with grievous wounds even before the fall, was unable to endure the impact and fainted immediately. No matter what, Qin Zhong is a Cosmos Bridge realm expert. It's just a distance of 1,000 meters. He won't die that easily. Zhang Xian shook his head. Back then, Feng Shi and his team also fell from an altitude of 1,000 meters, but they still survived the fall. Even if this fellow was severely injured by one of the puppets earlier on, considering the defensive artifacts he had in his possession as the young master of the Beast Hall, it was impossible for him to die from this. At worst, he would only be bed-bound for a few months. After explaining the matter to the others, Zhang Xian turned to the green-leaf winged dragon beast and commanded, "What are you waiting for? Hurry up and bring us to the Beast Hall." Even though this huge fellow was wounded as well, it was still conscious. Upon meeting Zhang Xian's gaze, it began to tremble in fear. Roar! Hearing those words, it immediately struggled to its feet and stepped forward. Possessing the dragon bloodline, it possessed an innate fear toward those capable of uttering the dragon language. Naturally, it could only obey Zhang Xian's commands obediently. Hoo hoo hoo! The trio leaped onto the back of the aerial spirit beast, and leaving the unconscious Qin Zhong behind, they advanced toward the Beast Hall. This lesson should serve well to teach that arrogant Qin Zhong to remain humble for the rest of his life. After flying for some time, the group finally arrived at the Beast Hall. The Huanyu Beast Hall was larger and more majestic than the Beast Halls Zhang Xian had seen in the past. Countless spirit beasts filled both the sky and the land, creating an extremely boisterous atmosphere that could be felt even from a distance away. Several hundred meters away from Beast Hall, Zhang Xian and Luo Qiqi alighted from the back of the spirit beast. This fellow was the tamed beast of the young master of the Beast Hall. If they were to arrive there on it, it could potentially cause a lot of trouble, and it would be troublesome to explain the matter. As for why they chose to ride the Greenleaf Winged Dragon Beast to the Beast Hall instead of Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy directly, the answer was simple. Hongyuan Empire was more than 1,000,000 kilometers away from Huanyu Empire, and while the Greenleaf Winged Dragon Beast was at the Consonant Spirit Realm, it would take at least 1.5 months for it to cover that distance. It was less than a month until the start of the school term, so Zhang Xian would be late for the entrance examination if he were to ride on its back. On the other hand, there should be higher-ranked spirit beasts in the Huanyu Empire Beast Hall for them to ride on. Thus, they decided to stop by here first. Upon stepping into the lounge of the Beast Hall, the trio was immediately stunned by the huge crowd. The territory of Huanyu Empire stretched across the horizon, and there were countless who visited the Beast Hall every day to travel around on the spirit beasts. There were around a dozen queues, and every queue had several hundred people lining up. Judging from the sight, some of them might have even been lining up since a month or two ago. The number of aerial spirit beasts, savage beasts, and beast tamers in the Beast Hall is limited. As such, it is normal to have to queue for days before getting a ride. Looking at the huge queue before her, Luo Qiqi smiled bitterly. Due to the limited number of beast tamers, aerial spirit beasts, and savage beasts, it was impossible to fulfill everyone's demands. As such, the Beast Hall would allocate queue numbers each day, and those whose numbers weren't called would have to wait till the second day, the third day, or even beyond that. In the Hongyuan Beast Hall, there are even a few who failed to get a ride after queuing for 2 months straight. Even though there are fewer people here, I fear that it will still take around 10 days or so before we can get a ride. Yu Fei nodded. The number of experts and esteemed personnel far exceeded the number of spirit beasts and beast tamers available in the Beast Halls. Traveling had always been and was likely to remain a huge problem on the Master-Teacher continent. If only Yi Qian were here. He is well acquainted with the people here, so he may have been able to allow us to bypass the queue, Luo Qiqi said bitterly. If he were here, there would be no need for us to come all the way here. The royal family should have some spirit beasts as well, so we could have just asked him to bring some over," replied Euphraia. While most of the aerial spirit beasts were centered in the Beast Hall, the royal family of most empires and kingdoms would rear a few themselves. Back then, the flying ship that Hong Shi and the others left on was powered by the aerial spirit beasts of the empire. If Yi Qian was here, given his identity as a crown prince, he could easily have brought a few aerial spirit beasts out for them. They wouldn't have had to come all the way here to the Beast Hall just to find a ride. Given the huge number of people here, it would be difficult for them to find a suitable aerial spirit beast. Forget it, borrowing a spirit beast from the Empire is an extremely troublesome procedure, and one will also incur a debt to the Empire. It will be much better to use the spirit beasts from the Beast Hall instead, Luo Qiqi said. Logically speaking, given Euphaia's identity, even if Yi Qian wasn't around, it wouldn't be too difficult for her to borrow a few spirit beasts from Yi Wentian. But her unique identity complicated the matter. As the princess of Hongyuan Empire and a master teacher, if she were to ask for a favor, she would incur a debt which she would have to repay in the future. Since that was the case, it would be better for them to rent a ride from the Beast Hall instead. Not to mention, master teachers possessed a privilege on this aspect. They had a priority queue just for them. On top of that, Luo Qiqi and Euphraia were 5-star master teachers. They were qualified to find the hall master, or the elders of the Beast Hall straight to request for a better spirit beast and beast tamer. "Let's go!" Thus, the group proceeded forward. At that moment, Luo Qiqi suddenly thought of something, and she turned to the young man beside her and asked, "Zhang Shi, since you are a beast tamer, do you have any acquaintances here?" "This is my first time here, so how could I possibly have any acquaintances here?" Zhang Xian shook his head. It was his first time in Huanyu capital, so how could he know anyone here? That's true. Recalling how Zhang Shi had arrived later them, it was indeed unlikely for him to have any acquaintances here. All right then. Nodding, Luo Qiqi surveyed the surroundings to find a member of the Beast Hall whom she could ask to show them to an elder or the hall master when a delighted voice suddenly called out, "Zhang Shi, why are you here?" Turning around, Zhang Xian saw an elder walking to him with an excited smile on his face. "Hall Master Han?" Upon seeing the elder, Zhang Xian was taken aback. The person was none other than the hall master whom he met at Coke's Ridge when he tamed the demon sink beast back then, Han Chong. Why was he here? Thanks to Zhang Shi's help, I managed to triumph over Luo Ming in the competition and gained the opportunity to study at Huanyu Empire. Han Chong smiled. He had once suffered a trauma which resulted in a sharp fall in his fighting prowess. Thus, he turned his attention to the demon sink in the hope of taming it to defeat Luo Ming. However, while he was doing so, he met Zhang Xian. Not only did Zhang Xian save him when Demon Sink Beast went on a rampage, the latter even treated his trauma, allowing him to regain his former strength. Due to that, he gained the opportunity to enter a higher-ranked beast hall to further his knowledge of beast taming. It could be said that Zhang Xian was his benefactor. If not for Zhang Shi, he would already be dead by now. He'd thought that it would be hard for him to meet this incredible genius again, but who knew that he would actually reunite with him here? Hearing the explanation, Zhang Xian immediately understood what was going on. It is through your own capability that you obtained this opportunity. I only did what I should. He recalled how much Han Chong valued this opportunity. For it, he spent 3 entire years trying to tame Demon Sink Beast. Zhang Shi is too polite. After trading a few pleasantries, Han Chong asked, "Is Zhang Shi here to take the 5-star Beast Tamer examination or?" "Actually, we are intending to head to Hongyuan Empire, so we would like to rent a fast spirit beast with good stamina." Zhang Xian chuckled. "May I ask for Hall Master Han's help with this matter?" "This isn't a problem at all. I'll show you to the Beast Lodge." Hearing that it was just a small matter, Han Chong hurriedly nodded. Even though he came from the branch in Myriad Kingdom Alliance, as an ex-hall master, his standing was still higher than ordinary beast tamers. It wasn't a problem for him to find a spirit beast for Zhang Xian. "I'll be thanking you then, Hall Master Han." Zhang Xian smiled in delight. Han Chong shook his head. There's no need to stand on ceremony. Also, there's no need to call me Hall Master Han. I am only an ordinary 4-star beast tamer here, so you can just address me as Beast Tamer Han. While he was a Hall Master in the Myriad Kingdom Alliance branch, he was nothing more than an ordinary beast tamer here except for his slightly higher standing. It would be inappropriate for him to be addressed as Hall Master here, and it could even be taken as insubordination. All right. Zhang Xian nodded. Following behind Han Chong, the group headed for the Beast Lodge. On the other hand, seeing how Zhang Xian walked away with a 4-star beast tamer right after claiming that he knew no one in the Beast Hall, Yu Fei and Luo Qiqi glanced at one another, and their eyelids twitched frenziedly. You call this knowing no one here? Who are you trying to fool? Why did this Zhang Shi feel so upright and dependable at times, and yet so unreliable and eccentric at others? Chapter 685. You know the beast language? The Huanyu Empire Beast Hall's Beast Lodge was established in the midst of the mountain forest. Countless spirit beasts lived leisurely in the area. Even though many of them were natural enemies of one another, they were still able to live harmoniously with one another after being tamed. While walking to their destination, Han Chong asked, Hunyuan Empire is more than 1,000,000 kilometers away from here. How much time do you have for your journey? Zhang Xian calculated for a moment before replying. Of course, the faster the better. It would be best if we can arrive within 20 days. It had been 9 days since Hongshi and the others had departed. If they wanted to catch up, they would have to shorten the month's journey to about 20 days. 20 days? Han Chong suddenly stopped and frowned. If you wish to arrive at Hongyuan Empire within 20 days, you will require a transcendent mortal 7-dan spirit beast at the very least. Long journeys were very different from short journeys. Even if a spirit beast could cover 100,000 kilometers in a day at maximum, the journey could still easily stretch on for a month. After all, it would be impossible for the spirit beast to maintain its full speed throughout the entire journey, and it would also need to rest and recuperate as well. Also, cultivation realm didn't necessarily translate to speed either. Different aerial spirit beasts had different strengths, and there were plenty of powerful spirit beasts who had a slow flight speed. Nevertheless, the minimum requirement for any aerial spirit beast to reach Hongyuan Empire in 20 days was for it to be a transcendent mortal 7-dan spirit beast. Zhang Xian nodded. He was a beast tamer as well, and he had a deep understanding of spirit beasts. He could also roughly gauge the traveling times of different aerial spirit beasts. Only 5-star pinnacle beast tamers are able to tame such a spirit beast. All right, I'll bring you to the Elder Hall to take a look then. Han Chong frowned. If it was just a transcendent mortal 5-dan spirit beast, Han Chong would surely be able to rent it for Zhang Xian easily. However, as transcendent mortal 7-dan spirit beasts were extremely hard to tame, even for a 5-star beast tamer, their quantity was severely limited. As such, this matter would necessitate the approval of the Elder Hall. The Elder Hall? Will this be too troublesome? Zhang Xian asked. It's fine. My teacher happens to be a 5-star pinnacle beast tamer. If he learns that you are a 4-star beast tamer and a Grand Master physician at such a young age, he will surely be delighted to help you. Han Chong smiled. While they were speaking, they circled around the mountain forest and arrived at a log house. The entire residence was extremely simplistic in design, constructed using only wood and mud. It contrasted starkly to the extravagant infrastructures around the Beast Hall. Pushing open the door of the log house, they saw cages of all sizes placed all around the vast living room. Savages beasts and spirit beasts were housed in those cages, and they varied in terms of size and species. Making a quick estimation, there were around 80 cages in here. These are... Upon seeing all of these cages, Zhang Xian was bewildered. This should be the living quarters of the teacher whom Han Chong spoke of. However, most of the beasts in the cages possessed low cultivation, and there were even a few beneath Zhongshi realm. A 5-star pinnacle beast tamer, a transcendent mortal 8-dan expert, could easily flick a savage beast of that tier to death, so there should be no reason for him to rear them. Oh, my teacher is... Realizing the doubts Jiang Xian was harboring, Han Chong was just about to explain when Jia, a spirited old man, suddenly walked into the room. The old man's hair and beard were both white, and he carried a book in his hands. Seemingly oblivious to the crowd in his log house, he continued walking forward while muttering something under his breath. His face slowly lit up with excitement along with his mutterings, as if he had deciphered a mystery. "Teacher!" Han Chong stepped forward and addressed him. "Don't interrupt me. We'll talk after I'm done." Not even sparing a glance to Han Chong, the old man waved his hands and walked up to a cage. Inside the cage were 8 Jizuan realms scarlet-coated hamsters. These hamsters were small in size, but their ability to burrow was astonishing. There were even some who specially groomed them to have them dig out some space underground to construct an underground chamber. But of course, considering how the old man had them locked in a cage, that probably wasn't his motive. Seeing his teacher pay little regard to him, Han Chong turned to the trio in embarrassment. "Teacher has always been like this. As long as he is in the midst of his research, he will ignore everything in his surroundings." "No worries." Jiang Xian smiled. Even though he had to get to Hongyuan Empire as soon as possible, he had this bit of time to spare. On top of that, he was also curious about what the old man was up to. Ignoring the crowd, the old man flipped a few pages on the book, and on a certain page he suddenly stopped. As though he had finally found what he was looking for, his eyes lit up in agitation. He immediately turned his sight to the scarlet-coated hamsters, took in a deep breath, and shouted, "Borohalomsin!" Along with the chanting of the old man, the scarlet-coated hamsters widened their eyes and began to puke, as if they had heard something extremely disgusting. "They are vomiting? This isn't right!" The old man scratched his head as he flipped the pages of the book once more. "My pronunciation must be off. I should try again. Borohalomsin. Hoo. The eyes of the scarlet-coated hamsters suddenly rolled upward, and their legs began to spasm. 2 of them tried to get away, but they ended up knocking against the bars of the cage and fainted. "This?" Everyone widened their eyes in shock. Even Jiang Xian was astonished by the sight. What did the old man say to disgust the scarlet-coated hamsters so much that they would rather knock themselves out than to listen to it for a moment longer? Suddenly realizing something, Luo Qiqi turned to Han Chong and asked, "Is this beast language?" Even though she wasn't a beast tamer, her occupation as a master teacher required her to have a degree of understanding of all occupations, and she did once read about the ancient beast language before. It was said to have been compiled by Kong Shi himself, but with the passing of time, it gradually disappeared from the world. Even though the heritage was still existent, it was grasped in the hands of a small minority, and it was never passed down to outsiders. Could it be that Han Chang's teacher had already learned the language, and was currently experimenting with it? Just that, why would his words cause such an extreme reaction in the scarlet-coated hamsters to make them vomit like that? "My teacher is in the midst of studying the beast language, and there has been some success in his research already." Han Chong nodded. "Success?" Jiang Xian and the others were speechless. "Making a savage beast puke, and you call that success? One punch can easily do the same." Cough, cough. Hearing the conversation and seeing the reaction of the crowd, the old man was a little embarrassed. Closing his book and tidying his appearance, he turned around and said, "Han Chong, didn't I instruct you to study yourself? Do you have something for me? Reporting to teacher, Jiang Shi over here is my benefactor, and he wishes to rent a transcendent mortal 8-dan spirit beast to travel to Hongyuan Empire." Han Chong quickly replied, "Transcendent mortal 8-dan?" The old man frowned. "There are only 3 aerial spirit beasts of this caliber in the entire beast hall. 2 of them were rented by the Huanyu royal family, while the last one has just returned from a long journey and is exhausted. I'm afraid that there aren't any available at the moment. Besides, even though I am an elder, I don't have the absolute say in such matters. Dispatching a transcendent mortal 8-dan aerial spirit beast requires the approval of the Elder Conference and the Hall Master. This..." Han Chang's face reddened in embarrassment. The management of the Huanyu Empire Beast Hall was much stricter than the Myriad Kingdom Alliance branch. Transcendent Mortal 8 Dan Spirit Beasts were the strongest beings throughout the entire empire, so they wouldn't be given any work unless truly required. Furthermore, the approval of the Elder Conference was required to dispatch them. Back then, when Han Chong was the Hall Master of the Myriad Kingdom Alliance Beast Hall, he could move any spirit beasts with just a single word. He thought that his teacher, as one of the top leaders of the Beast Hall, would possess such authority here, but from the looks of it, the matter wasn't as simple as it seemed. Then, are there any Transcendent Mortal 7 Dan Spirit Beasts available? Even though Transcendent Mortal 7 Dan Aerial Spirit Beasts were slightly slower, it was still within an acceptable range for Zhang Xian. There is a total of 14 Transcendent Mortal 7 Dan Spirit Beasts in our guild, but they are all the tamed beasts of elders, and only 5 of them are capable of flight. If you wish to rent one, you will need an elder to drive it personally, so it won't be easy either. The old man shook his head. Furthermore, most of the Transcendent Mortal 7 Dan Aerial Spirit Beasts aren't suited for traveling long distances, so I fear that they won't be much faster than most of the Transcendent Mortal 6 Dan Spirit Beasts. Most of the spirit beasts in the Beast Hall were tamed by the beast tamers collectively or groomed by an apprentice of a low-ranked beast tamer. These spirit beasts were often up for rent to the public. On the other hand, there were also private spirit beasts, which were the tamed beasts that accompanied their tamer's side. Most of them were more suited than battle, so while they could cover short distances swiftly, it was difficult for them to persevere for long distances. On top of that, most of the Transcendent Mortal 7 Dan Spirit Beasts in the Beast Hall were landbound, and those capable of flight could only do it in short spurts. There were simply too few aerial spirit beasts who were capable of covering long distances such as that between Huanyu Empire and Hongyuan Empire. Is there no other solution? Han Chong asked anxiously. Zhang Shi had helped him a lot, and it wasn't easy for him to obtain a chance to repay the debt. He felt embarrassed that he had boasted earlier that it wouldn't be a problem only to let the other party down a few moments later. There is no other way around it. The old man shook his head firmly. At that moment, he suddenly recalled something and said, "Unless you manage to convince that spirit beast to help. If you can do it, you can probably reach Hongyuan Empire in less than 10 days. That spirit beast?" Han Chong seemed to understand which spirit beast the old man was referring to, and he shook his head with a bitter smile. But at this moment, he suddenly recalled the various miraculous feats the young man had achieved with the demon Sink Beast, and his eyes suddenly lit up. "That's right! Teacher, even though we might have been unable to persuade it, perhaps Zhang Shi might be able to succeed." Seeing his student getting so agitated, the old man frowned. He glanced at Zhang Xian doubtfully and asked, "Him?" He didn't mean to look down on Zhang Xian, but the latter seemed to only be in his early 20s. At this age, even if he was talented, he could only be a 2-star beast tamer at best. With such limited capability, what could he possibly achieve? After all, not even the Hall Master had been able to deal with that fellow. Even though Zhang Shi is young, he is a true 4-star beast tamer. He was the one who tamed the demon Sink Beast, which I failed to do even after 3 years of effort. Han Chong quickly explained. Furthermore, it seems that Zhang Shi knows a bit of beast language as well, and it seems to be more effective than teachers. Beast language? You are well versed in the ancient beast language? The old man was taken aback, and the doubt in his eyes deepened. The heritage of the ancient beast language had disappeared many millenniums before, and those who managed to lay their hands on it were all the top beast tamers on the continent. However, all of them viewed what they knew as their greatest treasure, and were unwilling to share it with the public, so how could such a young fellow possibly know the ancient beast language? I studied it for a while. Zhang Xian nodded. Studied it for a while? I have been researching it for more than 50 years. And I barely managed to scratch the surface. What is the use in studying it for a while? Hearing the other party's words, disappointment flashed across the old man's face. Just as he was about to continue speaking, he suddenly saw the young man before him inhale deeply before opening his mouth. Moo! Voila! All of the spirit beasts and savage beasts in the room immediately crouched on the floor, trembling in fear. On the other hand, the old man also felt his entire body jolt upon hearing that sound. His vision went dark, and he fell onto the floor, convulsing ceaselessly. Chapter 686. 8 Notes of Heavenly Dragons. Even though Zhang Xian's dragon language was the most effective on those possessing the dragon bloodline, due to the low cultivation realm of the savage beasts and spirit beasts in the room, it was able to instill fear into them as well. Against the abrupt roar, it was already amazing that some of them were still able to retain their consciousness. Zhang Xian could understand why the spirit beasts and savage beasts would react like that to his roar, but, turning to the old man, he asked with a perplexed expression, "Elder, are you fine?" The reason why the spirit beasts and savage beasts lay down was due to their inborn instincts, which instilled the fear of dragons into them. Why is a human like you behaving the same way as them? Not to mention, to be convulsing as if you have lost your soul, and that white foam flowing out from your mouth. Did my dragon language somehow disgust you? Teacher! Han Chong was also astonished. He hurriedly rushed forward to grab the other party's Rinzhong acupoint and infused Jinqi into his body. Only then did the old man finally regain his consciousness. The language you just spoke! Could it be the true voice of dragons? As soon as the old man came to, he hurriedly stood up and turned to look at Zhang Xian in agitation and disbelief. I'm not too sure either. Those are just a few notes that I learned on a whim, Zhang Xian replied. In truth, he was not too sure what this language was, and all along, he thought that it was a part of the ancient beast language as well. Of the 3 notes he had learned back at the Xianyuan Kingdom Beast Hall, this one was the most useful. Thus, he always utilized this note whenever he needed to deal with spirit beasts. Somehow, it seemed to have a restraining effect on all those that possessed traces of the dragon bloodline. Learned on a whim? A human actually learned the true voice of dragons as well? The old man stared at Zhang Xian in disbelief. At that moment, he suddenly exclaimed, "Wait here for a moment!" Following which, he ran out of the room. A moment later, he returned with an ancient book in his hands, and he flipped it open. Take a look! Lowering his head, Zhang Xian realized that the note which he had just vocalized was written in the book as well. Grabbing the book, Zhang Xian casually flipped through a few pages and took a look at the cover as well. Noticing some similarities in the content of the ancient book he found in the Library of Heaven's Path back then, he couldn't help but ask, "This is called the True Voice of Dragons?" An ancient beast tamer compiled the knowledge known of the subject and wrote this book. According to it, the language you have just spoken is known as the True Voice of Dragons. True Voice of Dragons? Zhang Xian was taken aback. The old man nodded. Legend has it that due to the overwhelming strength of the dragon tribe, they were bound by the natural laws of heaven, preventing them from vocalizing most tones. As such, they were limited to utilizing only 8 tones to express their joy, anger, sorrow, reminiscence, and frustration. Nevertheless, you mustn't underestimate these 8 tones. Even with just 8 tones, the content of the dragon language is still far richer than human speech. Zhang Xian nodded. As a beast tamer, he had read innumerable records regarding beasts, and it was theorized that the heavens would take something away from beings that were too strong to maintain equity. Voice was one of them. Nevertheless, even with just 8 tones, the dragon tribe could easily express many different terms through a unique combination of tones. Under the long heritage of the dragons, their language had grown to be far richer than even the humans. The simplest things can sometimes prove to be the most powerful tools. There are simply too many combinations to the dragon language, so without interacting with a real dragon, it's impossible for anyone to fully understand the language. More importantly, at which, the old man's eyes widened in disbelief and he uttered, "The 8 tones of heavenly dragons require one to possess a pure-blooded dragon bloodline to vocalize. The body of a human can't possibly endure the pressure of such notes. So, how did you do it? Do you possess the pure-blooded dragon body?" Pure-blooded dragon body? Zhang Xian questioned in bewilderment. Yes. The pure-blooded dragon body is a unique constitution that is even more powerful than the pure yang body and pure yin body. Once the constitution is awakened, the dragon bloodline in one's body will become incomparably close to a pure-blooded dragon, and one's cultivation and fighting prowess will be boosted significantly, and the concept of cultivation bottlenecks will become non-existent. The more the old man spoke, the more his face flushed in agitation. Pure-blooded dragon body, this was one of the strongest unique constitution in the world. Given that the man before him was able to vocalize the dragon language that all humans should be incapable of, could he really possess such a constitution? If that was true, then it would truly be fearsome. Teacher, do you really possess the pure-blooded dragon body? Hearing the words of the old man, Luo Qiqi and Yu Feier glanced at one another momentarily before turning their curious gazes to Zhang Xian. Based on Zhang Shi's legendary record, his cultivation did improve at a monstrous pace. All along, they had attributed it to Yang Shi, but could the pure-blooded dragon body have played an important part as well? If that was the case, many things that had bewildered them previously could be explained. Zhang Xian scratched his head. How could he possibly possess the pure-blooded dragon body? The only reason he was able to vocalize the dragon language was due to the Heaven's Path Xinqi and Heaven's Path Golden Body. But of course, he couldn't explain any of this either, so he could only change the subject. Does this book record all 8 of the tones? Record all 8 tones? Of course not. Seeing that the other party was unwilling to divulge much, the old man also chose to put the matter aside. Shaking his head, he continued, The 8 tones of heavenly dragons is the language of the dragon tribe. Humans aren't qualified to learn and utilize it. In truth, this book only records the deductions on how those sounds came to be. The meaning of those words and the method to vocalizing them are unclear in it. I see. Zhang Xian casually flipped through the book while he immersed his consciousness into the Library of Heaven's Path. He could read much faster in the Library of Heaven's Path, and its innate function also allowed him to discern the truth from the false. Soon, Zhang Xian swept through the entire book, and came to a realization. Just as the other party had said, the book mainly recorded the origin of the 8 tones of heavenly dragons, and its relationship to the dragon tribe. As for the rest, it was extremely unclear. Of the 8 tones, the mu which he often used was also recorded in it. However, even though there were more than 30 pages depicting its vocalization, none of them were correct. As for the other 2 tones that he had learned previously, they weren't among the 8 tones, so they were probably not a part of the dragon language. This explained why those 2 notes were ineffective against the spirit beasts when he tried them out. It was also stated in the book that due to physiological differences, even if humans were to learn the proper way of vocalizing the sound, they would still be unable to imitate the dragons. As such, the 30-page depiction of its vocalization were just deductions on the author's part, and there was no evidence to back up his findings. One of the tones seems to be correct? Just as Zhang Xian was about to finish reading the book, his eyes suddenly lit up. Nearing the end, there was actually a correct depiction of one of the 8 tones. The second tone of the 8 tones of heavenly dragons, Mao. Memorizing the way to vocalize it, Zhang Xian made a mental note to try it when he got the chance. At this moment, he suddenly recalled the peculiarity that happened just a while ago, and his eyes fell upon the old man before him. It's written in the book that the 8 tones of heavenly dragons only has the effect of restraining lifeforms possessing the dragon bloodline, and this is known as the majesty of the pure-blooded dragon. But if that is the case, why did you fall to the ground previously as well? Zhang Xian wasn't the only one curious about this matter. Luo Qiqi, Han Chong, and Yu Feier also turned their gazes over as well. Even though Zhang Shi's voice was loud, that was all it was to them. They weren't influenced by the 8 tones of heavenly dragons, and they didn't feel any pressure from it either. So why would a transcendent mortal 8-dan pinnacle elder fall to the ground? Not to mention, the latter even convulse ceaselessly and leak white foam. The old man didn't seem to be surprised by the question at all. After a long moment of silence, he finally sighed and said, "Follow me." After which, he walked to the backyard of the log house. "Teacher." Seeing his teacher beckoning them to the backyard, Han Chong was bewildered. It had been some time since he had come under his teacher's tutelage, but the latter had strictly warned him never to go to the backyard. There was one time that he sneaked in out of curiosity, but before he could get a good look, he was caught. He ended up being reprimanded and was given a stern warning against it. However, all of that only heightened his curiosity. Nevertheless, for fear of angering his teacher, he didn't dare to sneak in anymore. He didn't expect his teacher to actually bring them in of his own accord. Not knowing the history behind the backyard, Zhang Xian and the others followed the old man casually around the log house and to the backyard. There was a small mound in the backyard, and a tombstone was erected in front of the mound. Glancing at the tombstone, 6 words were written on it: the grave of Draconic Granite Beast. The transcendent mortal 8-Dan spirit beast that rules over all land-bound lifeforms. Draconic Granite Beast? Zhang Xian frowned. That's right. The old man nodded. Gazing at the tombstone with complex emotions, he said, He is my tame beast. Teacher's tame beast? Han Chong was stunned. His eyes slowly widened as he asked, Teacher's tame beast is dead? In truth, in the days he had been in the Huanyu Empire Beast Hall, he had never seen his teacher's tame beast before. He thought that it might have been dispatched on a mission or something, but never had he imagined that it would actually be dead. Beast tamers could have more than one tame beast, but they would have to do a lot to win their trust. Most beast tamers would choose to view their tamed beast as their closest friend, or even their kin. As such, the death of a tamed beast could be a heavy blow to a beast tamer. There were quite a few who never recovered from the emotional trauma. Was the death of his tamed beast the reason why his teacher chose to live in such a remote location? My tamed beast is dead. Because of me. The old man shook his head. Because of you? I tamed this draconic granite beast when I was in the midst of my 5-star beast tamer examination. The old man sighed as he recounted the story. After taming the draconic granite beast and successfully advancing to become a 5-star beast tamer, he grew complacent and fearless. Eventually, when he was fighting against an enemy one day, he sustained a fatal injury. Back then, his severe injuries were threatening to claim his life at any moment. It was the draconic granite beast who infused its blood essence into him to save him. Not too long later, it died. He had always felt guilty about this matter, so he buried the other party here, erected a tombstone, and swore to accompany the other party until his death. Due to the presence of the blood essence of the draconic granite beast in me, I am also subjected to the pressure from the voice of true dragons, the elder said. Zhang Xian nodded. It was no wonder. Even though the draconic granite beast had a huge stature, its blood essence was limited. Furthermore, in order to save him, the blood essence had to be of a certain purity. As such, even though the old man didn't exactly possess the dragon bloodline, it was still affected by it. Is this related to the reason why you studied the ancient beast language and the 8 notes of heavenly dragons? Zhang Xian asked. Considering how the other party had put everything aside to immerse himself in the research of the ancient beast language, it was likely related to the experiences he had. Yes. Back then, when I was severely injured, it was Draconic Granite Beast who saved me. However, there was another spirit beast present there then. It was the spirit beast which I said that could reach Hongyuan Empire within just 10 days. Great Violet-Wing Beast. The old man clenched his fists tightly together. Before the Draconic Granite Beast passed away, it said many words to me. However, as it was extremely weak then, it was unable to communicate telepathically to me, so I was unable to understand what it had said. All these years I have been trying my best to study the ancient beast language so as to learn what it said with its dying breath, and what kind of regrets it had that it wanted me to fulfill. At this point, the old man's eyes turned red. Chapter 687. I am done studying it. A typical beast tamer would have to spend several years of selfless giving and intimate conversations to win the trust and loyalty of a savage beast. Not everyone was like Zhang Xian, where a single beating would suffice. As such, the relationships between beast tamers and their tamed beasts tended to be extremely strong. Furthermore, this tie was further strengthened when they engaged in collaborative cultivation and fused their bloodlines together. This draconic granite beast had spent many years accompanying this elder, and in the latter's heart, it had already become his closest kin. On top of that, it had even given up its life for him. Thus, no matter how much trouble it would take, he wanted to fulfill the latter's dying will. "Has the Beast Hall tried taming the great violet-winged beast yet?" Zhang Xian frowned. Even if a beast tamer couldn't comprehend the ancient beast language, they were still able to communicate with one another telepathically. The only reason the elder wasn't able to interpret the draconic granite beast's last words and ended up immersing himself in the research of the ancient beast language was because the latter was too weak to communicate telepathically then. However, considering how the great violent-winged beast was present at that moment, it should have heard the words of the draconic granite beast. If someone tamed it, they would be able to learn of the draconic granite beast's dying message, and the elder wouldn't have to go through so much trouble. The elder shook his head. Even though a mature great violet-winged beast tends to be at Transcendent Mortal 8 Dan, this one has reached the level of half 9 Dan. There's no one in the Beast Hall who is sufficiently capable to tame it. Half 9 Dan? Yes. Even though it hasn't exactly reached 9 Dan yet, the advantages it derives from its superior physique and bloodline allows it to defeat most 9 Dan cultivators. Furthermore, the death of the draconic granite beast has made it hostile to humans, thus making it impossible to tame it, the elder said. The great violet-winged beast was a good friend of the draconic granite beast? Zhang Xian was perplexed. The elder hesitated for a moment before replying. They were lovers. Lovers? Zhang Xian was stunned. There were plenty of powerful spirit beast species that were extremely limited in terms of their numbers. As such, it would be difficult for them to find a companion from the same species. Under such circumstances, they would choose to find another powerful spirit beast to mate with. But of course, it was uncertain whether they would be able to procreate together or not. More often than not, they would regard the latter as their spiritual partner, a companion to fight and spend their days with. In fact, there were some human couples who had such platonic relationships as well. Upon reaching a certain level of cultivation, cultivators would begin to crave for spiritual intimacy rather than physical relationships. Procreation and physical pleasure would take the back seat instead. Since the great violet-winged beast and draconic granite beast were a couple, it was natural that they shared an intimate relationship. As such, it viewed the elder, who took the draconic granite beast away from it, in hostility. As such, how could it possibly be willing to inform the latter of the draconic granite beast's dying will? Thus, the elder was determined to study the ancient beast language so as to communicate and make peace with it. Upon hearing his teacher's words, Han Chong couldn't help but ask, "But teacher, since the great violet-winged beast was the companion of teacher's tamed beast, why does it still wreak havoc in the Beast Hall once every few days?" Wreak havoc? Luo Qiqi turned her gaze over curiously. Indeed. That fellow comes over several times a month to attack the Beast Hall and devour a few spirit beasts, resulting in immense fury among the beast tamers. The Beast Hall has gone to great lengths to capture it, but it was simply too strong and too fast, thus resulting in a failure each time. Han Chong explained. Even though he hadn't been in Huanyu Empire for too long, he was still able to learn of quite a few things. In the past month, the great violet-winged beast had already attacked the Beast Hall several times and devoured several spirit beasts. This had left many people furious, but due to the great violet-winged beast's overwhelming strength, there was nothing that they could do. All along, he had thought that the great violet-winged beast was just provoked by the spirit beasts becoming subservient to humans. There were plenty of spirit beasts who felt that humans weren't qualified to tame them, but from the looks of it now, it seemed like it was exacting vengeance for its companion. It is intentionally wreaking havoc in the Beast Hall because it is furious at the draconic granite beast's death. The other reason I have been studying the ancient beast language over the past few decades is to ask it exactly at once. The elder shook his head in disappointment. After which, it turned its eyes to Zhang Xian and asked, "Since you are able to vocalize even the true voice of dragons, are you by any chance knowledgeable in the ancient beast language as well?" Even if he possessed the pure-blooded dragon body, there was no way he could learn the true voice of dragons by himself. Thus, someone must have tutored him. Given that the certain someone was able to impart even the true voice of dragons, there was a chance that the person might just have imparted the ancient beast language along with it. While the other party said that he had only learned it for a while, he could just be saying so out of humility. Scratching his head, Zhang Xian said, "I am not too knowledgeable about the ancient beast language." He did learn a few words back then, but it had only managed to enrage the spirit beasts he had attempted to speak with. Given how he didn't even know the meaning of those words, it was no different from not knowing the language at all. Not too knowledgeable? Hearing those words, the elder's expectant eyes sank. Then, what about the 8 notes of heavenly dragons? Even though the great violet-winged beast didn't possess the dragon bloodline, if the other party could talk to it via the dragon language, he might just be able to convince it to reveal the truth regarding the matter back then. While verbal communication would be impossible, there were still various other ways for a human to communicate with a spirit beast. "I only know a single note." Zhang Xian felt even more embarrassed. The other party thought that he was well versed in the dragon language, but in truth, Zhang Xian only knew a single note. He could still scare a few spirit beasts possessing dragon bloodline with it, but communicating with just that single note was clearly impossible. A single note? The elder staggered speechlessly. When the young man used the dragon language, he thought that he had found a solution to this problem. But in the end, nothing had changed at all. "Forget it then." The elder shook his head helplessly. He had gathered many books on the ancient beast language in the past few hopes in the hope that he could piece it together slowly. However, this language was simply far too difficult. Without anyone to guide him along, he couldn't even differentiate the true words from the false, so he wasn't able to make much progress in his research. Considering how highly Han Chong thought of the young man, he thought that he could learn a thing or two from the latter. Who knew that the latter would be as ignorant as him? Zhang Xian gazed at the elder and asked, "It's still too early to give up. Given that you have been studying the ancient beast language for decades, you must have gathered quite a number of books. May I borrow them to read? Perhaps I might be able to make a breakthrough in your research." "Borrow? Breakthrough?" The elder smiled bitterly. "You mean that you want to start studying now?" "Aunt," Zhang Xian nodded. "Do you know how difficult the ancient beast language is?" Seeing that the other party had such an intention, the elder couldn't help but shake his head. The ancient beast language has lost most of its heritage, and the records that remain are all unclear and mixed with falsehood. Putting aside whether the vocalization method for the words in them are true or not, even if they are the meanings listed in the book even accurate? I have already spent 50 years studying the topic, but I haven't been able to make any advancement at all, so... The elder didn't finish his words, but his meaning couldn't have been clearer. He thought that Zhang Xian was treating the entire matter too lightly. He had spent his entire life studying the topic, only to find himself as ignorant as he was at the very start. If the ancient beast language could be grasped that easily, it wouldn't have lost most of its heritage in the first place, and innumerable beast tamers wouldn't have failed in their attempts to restore it either. "I am just very interested in the ancient beast language, so I wish to take a look at those books. If I can comprehend something from them, that would of course be for the best. But if I can't, there's no harm in it either," said Zhang Xian, knowing the thoughts going through the other party's mind. "All right then. All of the books I have on the ancient beast language are in my log house. Over the years I have collected everything related to the ancient beast language that has appeared in Huanyu Empire." The elder waved his hands in disinterest. Even though it did take him a lot of trouble to gather his collection of books, it wasn't of particular importance to him. It mattered not to him whether the other party read them or not. "You have my gratitude." Zhang Xian clasped his fist before walking out. As his figure disappeared into the log house, the elder couldn't help but shake his head in disappointment. Even with someone imparting the ancient beast language, it's impossible to learn it without several years of practice. If it could be learned that easily, wouldn't I have wasted the past 50 years of my life for nothing? He thought that the other party should possess incredible composure given that he was able to utter the true voice of dragons. In the end, the other party was still so impetuous. The ancient beast language was tied to a huge secret of the Beast Hall. If it could be learned that easily, beast tamers like them wouldn't face so much difficulty trying to tame beasts. Hearing the doubt in the elder's voice, Luo Qiqi couldn't help but speak up for Zhang Xian. Teacher has always been a reliable person. Since he's going to read the books, he must have an idea in mind. Perhaps he really might just succeed. Hearing the young lady's address for the young man, the elder was stunned. He immediately turned his gaze over to her. Teacher? You are his student? The young lady's cultivation and disposition were both exceptional among her peers. Why would she acknowledge a person who was even younger than her as her teacher? That's right. Luo Qiqi nodded. If I recall correctly, you addressed him as Zhang Shi previously. Could the young man be a master teacher? Hearing Luo Qiqi's reply, the elder suddenly recalled how Han Chong addressed the young man as well. Han Chong pondered for a moment before replying. Zhang Shi is a 4-star master teacher, as well as the champion of the master teacher tournament. The reason he's heading for Hongyuan Empire is probably to study at the Master Teacher Academy. Han Chong had left the Myriad Kingdom Alliance even before the Master Teacher Tournament had begun, so there were many things that he was oblivious of. Nevertheless, he did hear some news regarding the matter. The champion of the Master Teacher Tournament? The elder was taken aback. Not only so, Zhang Shi is also a 4-star beast tamer and 4-star physician. Han Chong quickly mentioned. 4-star beast tamer? The elder frowned. Since he's a 4-star beast tamer, he should understand how difficult it is to learn the ancient beast language. It is unlikely for him to act so impulsively on the matter. If the young man was only a master teacher and was ignorant of beast taming, the elder could still understand the other party's actions. But a 4-star beast tamer should have already accrued considerable knowledge of the field, so how could he possibly not understand the difficulty involved in learning the ancient beast language? On the other hand, if he knew, how could he possibly utter such amateurish words? Shaking his head, the elder decided to put this matter behind him for now. Inform me when he's done reading the books. I'll take you to meet the Hall Master. Meet the Hall Master? Is teacher going to help them find an aerial spirit beast? Han Chang's eyes lit up. Since he's a 4-star master teacher and a beast tamer, there's no reason for us not to help him. I recall that the Hall Master has a transcendent mortal 7-dan spirit beast. Even though he never lends it anyone, he might be willing to compromise if I request it of him personally, the elder said. Thank you, teacher. Hearing that his teacher was willing to help, Han Chong hurriedly bowed in gratitude. At that moment, Jia, the door opened, and the young man walked out. Ah? Everyone was taken aback. Even the elder couldn't help but frown at the sight before him. I thought you were going in to read the books in order to learn the ancient beast language? Why are you out when it has barely been 10 minutes? The elder couldn't help but ask. Is the ancient beast language too hard to comprehend so you lost your interest? There was no doubt about it. This fellow must have faltered at the sight of the immense collection before him. Otherwise, how could he possibly finish in such a short period of time? It's indeed very difficult, but the reason I am out is not because I have lost my interest. It's because... At this point, Zhang Xian looked a little hesitant, but eventually, he still spoke decisively. I am done studying it. Chapter 688, Hall Master Qin. You're done studying? Everyone was dumbfounded. This was especially so for the elder. His face turned livid in rage. He had gone to great lengths to collect the books inside the log house, and he knew how huge his collection was. Over the past 50 years, through tapping into the connections of the guild, he had gathered as many ancient texts and scrolls regarding the ancient beast language as he could, and they numbered at least in the 100,000. Even he had to spend an entire 10 years to go through the whole collection. Yet, in just 10 minutes, the other party actually claimed that he was done. Even if you want to lie, you should come up with something better than that. What do you mean by you are done? The elder couldn't hold himself back anymore and harumphed. Oh, it means that. I have roughly grasped the language, and basic communication shouldn't be a problem, Zhang Xian said. He had immediately started sprinting around to collect the books as soon as he'd entered the room. In just a few minutes, the massive collection of 100,000 works was duplicated in the Library of Heaven's Path. Then, through the Library of Heaven's Path, he'd sieved out the truth from the falsehood. Astonishingly, he'd managed to find quite a few correct words. Even though many of these records were just speculation, and some of them were even utter rubbish that the authors had made up, there were simply too many of them in terms of numbers. As the saying goes, pile up a bed of sand and you will build a castle. By compiling all of them together, Zhang Xian was still able to derive quite a few correct words. The book which he had compiled contained the common phrases of the ancient beast language, as well as their vocalization methods. While it would still be difficult to hold a proper conversation, basic communication shouldn't be a problem. Basic communication shouldn't be a problem? Hearing the other party's words, the elder's face darkened. What arrogance! Even after 50 years of diligence, he hadn't even managed to grasp the tale of the language. Just take the experiment he did just a moment for example. His words had caused the scarlet-coated hamsters to puke in disgust. And yet, the young man before him actually claimed that he had mastered the basics of the language just moments after beginning to study? If that is the case, I must be worse than a pig for achieving nothing at all after so many years of research. Even if you wish to lie, at least say something more credible than this. Knowing that he would be doubted if he spoke the truth, Zhang Xian was just about to find another logical explanation for this matter when a young man suddenly barged into the room. Elder, something bad has happened. The great violet-winged beast is back again. It's back again? The elder's face darkened. Take me there. Yes. The young man hurriedly rushed in the direction where the destruction was ongoing, and the elder followed him closely. Let's go take a look as well. Seeing the elder leave hurriedly, Zhang Xian glanced at Luo Qiqi and the others and followed behind. Their primary intention here was to find an aerial spirit beast. Given that the great violet-winged beast was at half 9 Dan, if Zhang Xian were to tame it, it would save them a lot of trouble. Okay. Knowing the severity of the matter, Han Chong nodded and followed the group. Along the way, Zhang Xian learned from Han Chong that the latter's teacher went by the surname of Qian, and he was one of the more qualified and respected elders in the Beast Hall. As the harassment of the great violet-winged beast was linked to Elder Qian, he would rush over to deal with the matter each time. While it hadn't been long since Han Chong arrived at the Beast Hall, he had already encountered this situation numerous times already. As such, he had a deep impression of that huge fellow. Every time that fellow arrives, it will either cause devastating destruction or kill the other spirit beasts, causing many complaints from the customers. Speaking of the great violet-winged beast, even Han Chong couldn't help but feel a little frustrated. It was one thing for it to hurt the beast tamers in anger, but the main problem was that it also bared its fangs against the spirit beasts as well. There were a few customers who, after queuing for numerous days, finally got to the end of the line, but due to the spirit beasts getting injured, their ride was delayed significantly. This had caused the credibility of the Beast Hall to plummet. The Beast Hall did attempt to set several traps for the great violet-winged beast, but the latter seemed to always know of them in advance. Furthermore, its overwhelming strength also allowed it to break out of any encirclement easily and exact its wrathful vengeance once it returned. The Beast Hall even reported this matter to the headquarters, and the Hongyuan Empire Beast Hall specially sent a 6-star beast tamer over to deal with it. However, seemingly having realized the lurking danger, it kept clear of the Beast Hall for several months straight. And as soon as the 6-star beast tamer left, it immediately rushed back to wreak havoc once more. After so many tries, the personnel of the Beast Hall found themselves incapable of dealing with it at all. Helpless, they could only invite Elder Qian over each time to deal with it. However, there was indeed something very bizarre about the matter. Every time Elder Qian arrived on the scene, no matter how ferocious the great violet-winged beast had been a moment before, it would immediately turn away and leave, unwilling to harm him at all. All along, Han Chong had been perplexed about this matter. He thought that it was due to his teacher's formidable beast-taming capability that made the great violet-winged beast hesitant to face the latter. But from the looks of it now, it was probably related to the draconic granite beast. Chances were that the great violet-winged beast had made a promise to the draconic granite beast. Thus, no matter how displeased the great violet-winged beast was with Elder Qian, it was unwilling to do anything that would hurt him. "It's right in front!" At that moment, Han Chang's eyebrows suddenly shot up, and he abruptly rushed forward. Jiang Xian and the others also swiftly followed suit. Soon, a massive, violet spirit beast appeared before their eyes. With a transcendent mortal 3-dan spirit beast in its talons, it circled the sky majestically. On the other hand, Elder Qian was standing beneath it with an anxious look. Not too far away from Elder Qian stood 8 white-bearded elders. Of them, the one standing in the middle bore striking resemblance with Qin Zhong. Most likely, he was the famed Hall Master Qin. To think that fellow would be back so soon! Behind those white-bearded elders, Jiang Xian saw a familiar face. It was that fellow incapable of flight, Qin Zhong. Jiang Xian thought that he would take some time to return to the Beast Hall considering how his spirit beast had left him. "It seems the green-leaf-winged dragon beast returned to fetch him," Luo Qiqi whispered to Jiang Xian. Jiang Xian nodded. They had let the green-leaf-winged dragon beast go right after they had arrived at the Beast Hall. Knowing that its master was still lying unconscious in a ditch, it immediately rushed off to save him as soon as it was released. The Beast Hall wasn't too far away from where they fell earlier, so it didn't take too long for it to return with Qin Zhong. At this moment, Qin Zhong's body was completely wrapped up like a mummy. Even though he was severely injured, he wasn't in a critical condition. His eyes were fixated on the great violet-winged beast above, unaware that his nemesis was nearby. Gazing at the great violet-winged beast above, Elder Qian clenched his fists tightly and said, "Let the spirit beast go. I hope you won't involve the Beast Hall in our grudge. Otherwise, our draconic granite beast would surely be unable to rest in peace if he were to see this sight." Roar! Upon hearing Elder Qian mention the draconic granite beast, the fellow above gritted its teeth in anger. Not only did it not release the spirit beast, it even tightened its grip. Under the humongous pressure, the spirit beast and its claws seemed to be on the verge of being crushed to death. "Elder Qian and Hall Master Qin, please save my spirit beast." Looking at the sight in the sky, a 4-star beast tamer pleaded anxiously. Clearly, the spirit beast held hostage in the great violet-winged beast's claws was his tamed beast. It had taken him a lot of effort to tame the spirit beast, and throughout the long taming process, he had also come to bear feelings for the latter. "Beast Tamer Li, don't worry. I'll surely save your tamed beast," Elder Qian assured. He understood very well the pain of having one's tamed beast killed. He didn't want anyone to go through the same pain he did. After consoling Beast Tamer Li, Elder Qian turned to the sky and bellowed, "Great violet-winged beast! As long as you free it, I'll give you anything as long as it is within my means, be it blood essence or spirit stones." Hearing those words, Hall Master Qin frowned. "Elder Qian, you mustn't promise it that. Throughout the years, you have already given away nearly your entire wealth. Your cultivation will really stagnate if you continue giving in to the great violet-winged beasts like that." Considering Elder Qian's talent, he should have already long reached Transcendent Mortal 9-dan. However, as he gave away nearly the entirety of his savings to the great violet-winged beast, he was deprived of his cultivation resources, resulting in a significant reduction in his cultivation speed. On the contrary, through frequent blackmailing, the great violet-winged beast had managed to use those resources to reach half 9-dan first. If this were to continue on, the great violet-winged beast would only grow stronger and stronger, thus making it a greater threat to the Beast Hall. "This is what I owe to Draconic Granite Beast." Elder Qian shook his head. "But—" Hall Master Qin's face turned livid. "There are no buts. If not for the Draconic Granite Beast, I would have long been dead. It is already a huge mercy from the heavens that I've been able to live for so long. Putting aside my savings, if my death can bring great violet-winged beast solace, I'm willing to give my life up." With a resolute gaze, Elder Qian flicked his wrist and whipped out an entire bunch of beast essence, middle-tier spirit stones, and a few precious medicinal herbs. However, the amount wasn't large. It seemed like Elder Qian's wealth had really been swiped clean over the years. Just as Elder Qian was about to throw his remaining wealth over to the huge fellow in the sky, a nonchalant voice suddenly echoed through the surroundings. You owe a debt to your draconic granite beast, not to great violet-winged beast. Elder Qian, you really don't have to do so. Upon hearing the voice, everyone immediately turned their attention to the source, and they saw a young man walking over toward him. Father, he's the one who left me in such a tragic state. You mustn't let him off easily. Not expecting the fellow to actually stride up to them without fear, Qin Zhong's eyes immediately reddened in wrath. Him? Hall Master Qin's face darkened. Turning to Elder Qian, he asked, Elder Qian, do you recognize this young man? He's Han Chang's benefactor, a 4-star master teacher and beast tamer. Following which, he turned to the young man with a frown and waved his hands. This is none of your business, don't get involved in it. If you wish to borrow a spirit beast from the Beast Hall, I'll have to ask you to step aside. Of course, the young man who was walking over was none other than Zhang Xian. Unable to tolerate how Elder Qian kept giving in to the great violet-winged beast, he decided to step forward and intervene. However, the other party didn't seem to welcome his interference at all. Just as Zhang Xian was about to reply to the other party's words, a young lady behind him abruptly spoke up. What if we refuse? Refuse? Then don't even dream about renting a spirit beast from the Beast Hall. Elder Qian flung his sleeves angrily and harumphed. However, at that moment, he suddenly noticed Hall Master Qin's face turning pale, and his lips were quivering uncontrollably as well. At the same time, the latter also kept shooting him some looks, seemingly trying to hint something to him. Cough cough, Elder Qian. Calm down, that's not how we should treat our guests. What's wrong? Seeing the bizarre attitude from the Hall Master, Elder Qian was perplexed. However, before he received a response, the young lady standing behind Zhang Shi suddenly stepped forward. She glanced at Hall Master Qin and smiled with a face devoid of any warmth. If my memory doesn't fail me, you're Qin Zhao, right? You're the Hall Master here? With a pale face, Hall Master Qin hurriedly clasped his fist. Qin Zhao pays respect to Princess Fei. So you recognize me? With her hands behind her back, Yu Fei exuded a powerful, authoritative aura befitting that of a princess from a Tier 1 empire. I once accompanied my teacher to the royal palace, and I had the pleasure of meeting your highness. Qin Zhao quickly bowed deeply. However, before he could finish his words, his severely wounded son suddenly howled furiously. Father, that woman is an accomplice as well. Together with that fellow over there, those scum manipulated my spirit beast and made it plummet from the sky. You must redress my grievances. With his vision blocked by the crowd, Qin Zhong didn't notice his father's peculiar attitude. Thinking that his father was going to get even for him, his eyes reddened with excitement. On the other hand, upon hearing those words, Hall Master Qin staggered weakly, and he nearly fainted on the spot. Don't you call me. I'll let you be my father, but please don't call me father. Other people's sons practice filial piety, but why does mine seem so intent on dragging me down to the depths of hell? Chapter 689, Still alive? Princess? Seeing the Hall Master's face twisting in frustration, Elder Qian couldn't help but assess the young lady before him. Yu Wentian did have a few daughters, but none of their appearances or ages seemed to coincide with this young lady here. Besides, so what if the other party was a princess? As the esteemed Hall Master of the Beast Hall, a transcendent mortal 8-dan pinnacle expert, not even Yu Wentian would dare to do anything to him. Was there really a need for him to be so fearful of a mere princess? She's not Yu Wentian's daughter, she's the 6th princess of Hongyuan Empire, Princess Yu Fei. Noticing Elder Qian's confusion, Hall Master Qin immediately sent a telepathic message over for fear that he might say something rude. Hongyuan Empire? Hearing those words, Elder Qian's body suddenly trembled intensely, and he nearly fainted on the spot. The reticent lady who followed behind Zhang Shi like a maid was actually the princess of Hongyuan Empire? Hongyuan Empire was a Tier 1 empire, and it had many experts in its ranks. Furthermore, the Great Master Teacher Academy was located there as well. As a result, the royal family which ruled over the region wielded great prestige and authority. Not even Yi Wentian would dare to utter a word of complaint when berated by a princess from such an empire. Are you sure you are not mistaken? If this young lady over here is really a princess, then considering how she was following behind Zhang Shi subserviently, what in the world is Zhang Shi's background? Seeing Yu Fei bringing out her identity as a princess, Luo Qiqi stepped forward and asked, Fei, you know him? On my birthday a few years ago, Elder Bai from the Beast School gave me a white-tailed green wolf, and this Hall Master Qin happened to be behind him then. Yu Fei replied nonchalantly. Oh. Luo Qiqi nodded. Now that you mention it, I seem to recall it as well. I thought that the person then was just an ordinary disciple under Elder Bai. To think that he would be the Hall Master of the Huanyu Empire Beast Hall. As a close friend of Yu Fei, there was no way Luo Qiqi would miss Yu Fei's birthday. She could still remember how envious she was when she saw Elder Bai gifting Yu Fei a white-tailed green wolf as a present back then. Taking a closer look now, she also realized that Hall Master Qin looked extremely familiar. You are Luo Shi? Recognizing the close friend of Yu Fei, Hall Master Qin's lips twitched. Yes, you are indeed sharp. I am 5-star Master Teacher Luo Qiqi. Luo Qiqi nodded. 5-star Master Teacher? Elder Qian's body shook. If you are a 5-star Master Teacher, you should have said so earlier. If I knew earlier, I wouldn't have put on such airs and immediately rushed off to find the best spirit beast in the Beast Hall for you. Thus, Elder Qian turned to stare at Han Chong in anger. Didn't you say that Zhang Shi is a 4-star Master Teacher from the Myriad Kingdom Alliance? If that is really true, how can a 5-star Master Teacher possibly be his student? Han Chong also stared at Zhang Xian indignantly. Didn't you just pass your 4-star Master Teacher examination a few months ago? When in the world did you turn the princess of the Hongyuan Empire royal family and a 5-star Master Teacher into your follower and your student? They weren't the only ones who were feeling frenzied by the turn of events. At this moment, Qin Zhong also realized what was wrong, and he nearly burst into tears. He actually teased the princess from Hongyuan Empire and a 5-star Master Teacher. In fact, he even tried to get his father to teach the other party a lesson. It was fortunate that the other party didn't follow up on the matter. Otherwise, not even his father would be able to save him if the other party were to behead him on the spot out of anger. Seeing how they were getting sidetracked, Zhang Xian shook his head and said, All right, now is not the time to be talking about such unimportant matters. We should deal with the great violet-winged beast first. The transcendent mortal 3-Dan spirit beast was already on the verge of being crushed to death, and yet they were still chatting at this moment. Deal? How do we deal with it? Does Zhang Shi have any idea in mind? Judging by how Princess Yu Fei and Luo Qiqi seemed to hold the young man as the de facto leader of their group, Hall Master Qin could tell that the young man was not as simple as he seemed. After a moment of contemplation, Zhang Xian replied with a frown. I'll negotiate with it to see what it wants. If the other party possessed the dragon bloodline, he could easily stop it with a Mu or the newly learned Mao. However, that didn't seem to be the case, and it was likely that he was just going to waste his efforts. Since that was the case, he might as well ask the other party what its goal was. Negotiate? Hall Master Qin and Elder Qian frowned. It was precisely due to the communication barrier before them that made it difficult to negotiate with the vengeful great violet-winged beast. Otherwise, they wouldn't be so helpless before it either. Just as they were wondering what the young man was up to, the young man stepped forward and spoke. $% at UN #3. The great violet-winged beast in the sky was visibly stunned for a moment, but a moment later, it began roaring. Roar, 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 roar. The young man. #UN%. The great violet-winged beast. Roar, 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 roar. This is the ancient beast language? Seeing the man and the beast conversing with one another, Hall Master Qian's eyes nearly popped out from their sockets. Any beast tamer, regardless of their capability, would be able to qualify as a 6-star beast tamer at the very least just by knowing how to speak the ancient beast language once their cultivation reached the required level. Thus, it was unimaginable for him that this young man was actually able to speak the ancient beast language. Elder Qian, aren't you trying to learn the ancient beast language? You can study under Zhang Shi. The excited Hall Master Qian turned to look at Elder Qian, only to freeze in astonishment at the very next moment. The composed Elder Qian was currently clawing at his hair frenziedly, as though he was going insane. But it was no wonder he was reacting like that. It was just a moment ago that the young man was completely ignorant of the ancient beast language. Yet 10 minutes after entering his log house to browse through his collection of records, Zhang Shi returned and claimed that he had learned the basics of the language. All this while, Elder Qian thought that the latter was just boasting, but to think that it was actually true. When did the ancient beast language become so easy to learn? Could he have really wasted the last 50 years of his life for nothing? Otherwise, how could the results from his 50 years be unable to match up to 10 minutes of the other party's efforts? Just as he was on the verge of a breakdown, he saw the young man and the great violet-winged beast in the sky wrapping up their negotiation. Following which, the young man returned with a peculiar expression on his face. How did it go? Putting everything aside, Elder Qian quickly turned to look at Zhang Xian and asked anxiously, What did it say to you? Throughout these years, he had been dying to know what the draconic granite beast had said before his death, as well as to understand why the great violet-winged beast had kept pestering the beast hall over the years. This was the reason why he was able to persevere in his study of the ancient beast language for 50 years. The great violet-winged beast says that. At which, Zhang Xian scratched his head. It wants you to die. I knew it. After all, I was the one who caused the death of our draconic granite beast. As the culprit who resulted in the death of its lover, it is natural that it would harbor such deep hatred for me. Elder Qian suddenly looked as though he had aged 10 years. If not for his obstinacy and complacency back then, he wouldn't have been severely injured, and the draconic granite beast wouldn't have sacrificed itself for him either. As the draconic granite beast's companion, it was no wonder the great violet-winged beast wanted him dead. Cough, cough. That's not it. Seeing Elder Qian falling into an endless spiral of self-reproach, Zhang Xian hurriedly pulled him back. That's not it? Then what is the reason? Elder Qian was taken aback. It's because of what the draconic granite beast said before his death, Zhang Xian replied. What the draconic granite beast said before his death? The great violet-winged beast told you his dying message? Elder Qian was so agitated that his entire body began trembling. Over the past few decades, he had been dying to know the dying will of the draconic granite beast, but it was a pity that the great violet-winged beast refused to say anything at all. Or perhaps, he was simply unable to comprehend the latter's words, and that only amplified his guilt. Seeing how Zhang Shi uttered these words after conversing with the great violet-winged beast, could it be that the great violet-winged beast had revealed the draconic granite beast's dying message? That's right. The peculiar expression on Zhang Xian's face intensified. What did he say? Did he tell me to live well in his stead? Recalling the bits and pieces that he and his loyal tame beast had gone through together, Elder Qian's eyes turned red. Tears began flowing uncontrollably from his eyes. The draconic granite beast said. Conflicted, Zhang Xian hesitated for a long moment before finally spitting it out. He said that. I am not dead. Not dead? Elder Qian's body swayed weakly, and he spurted a mouthful of fresh blood. But I buried him. Elder Qian had always thought the last words of the draconic granite beast were entrusting its hopes and wishes to him. Who would have thought that its words would be, I am not dead? The heck! I have even felt his body. Stiff and frigid, how could he possibly still be alive? Furthermore, even if he wasn't dead then, having been buried underground for 50 years, he couldn't still be alive now. Not only was Elder Qian frenzied, Even Luo Qiqi and Yu Fei also widened their eyes, and they nearly fainted from shock. They had shed a tear earlier on after hearing the touching story of how the loyal draconic granite beast died for its master. Who could have known that it would actually be a horror story instead? To be buried alive. After 50 years, it should have long suffocated to death. Hall Master Qin and the elders also found their bodies trembling in shock at the revelation. For you, your tamed beast went to the extent of even offering its own blood essence, and yet you buried it alive. Given your doings, it would be a wonder if its companion was willing to let you off. Honestly speaking, it was already being very magnanimous by only wreaking havoc in the Beast Hall all these years. Zhang Xian and the others also shared the same thoughts as well. But in the end, Elder Qian was also an innocent party too. How could he have known that the draconic granite beast was still alive then? Furthermore, he had also been tortured with guilt throughout these years as well. Thus, Zhang Xian turned to him and asked, "Did you cremate the draconic granite beast?" "That? I didn't." Elder Qian shook his head. In truth, he did intend to cremate it back then, but the great violet-winged beast came to wreak havoc. Thinking that the great violet-winged beast was unwilling to see its companion being reduced to ash, he decided to simply bury it in the mountain forest and accompany it for life. "It's good that you didn't. Based on what the great violet-winged beast said, the draconic granite beast is just in a state of pseudo-death. After a period of rest and nourishment, he should be able to be revived. Even though you've buried him, it's fortunate that you didn't cremate him. There might still be a chance," Zhang Xian said. The great violet-winged beast had explained the matter thoroughly to him just now. The draconic granite beast possessed the dragon bloodline and a tough exterior reminiscent of granite, thus the origin of the name. After losing its blood essence, its body would become cold and rigid like a rock, similar to a corpse. Its breathing and heartbeat would also come to a temporary halt. However, this wasn't death in the truest sense. As long as it was well nourished in the time to come, it should be possible to awaken it very quickly. As the draconic granite beast had always been a rare species, and there had never been a case where one voluntarily gave away a huge amount of its blood essence, such a phenomenon wasn't recorded in the books. As such, not even a 5-star beast tamer like Elder Qian was aware of this ability of the draconic granite beast. Considering how the draconic granite beast had stopped its breathing and heartbeat, even if it was buried, as long as it wasn't cremated and hadn't decomposed yet, there should still be a chance of survival. No matter what, that was a powerful transcendent mortal 8-Dan spirit beast harnessing the dragon bloodline within it. There was no way it could die that easily. There is still a chance? Elder Qian's eyes lit up for a moment before dimming again in sorrow. But he has been buried for 50 years already. If it had just been a few months or even a year, there might still be a chance. But 50 years had passed, and there wasn't the slightest sign of recovery for the draconic granite beast. This period of time was more than sufficient for a pseudo-death to become real. Calm down, let's go over and take a look first. It'll be best if we can save him, but otherwise, it is still worth a shot. Zhang Xian sighed deeply. Who asked you to bury your tamed beast alive? The only thing we can do now is to quickly bring him out and diagnose his condition. Even if it were to end up futile in the end, at least this matter can be put to an end. On! Elder Qian quickly nodded and led the group to the backyard of the log house. At that moment, Zhang Xian suddenly recalled something and turned to the great violet-winged beast with a frown on his face. What are you waiting for? Put that spirit beast down! Roar! The great violet-winged beast released its claws indignantly. Boom! Falling onto the ground, the spirit beast fainted. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.